Welcome back, everybody. We are here for another incredible interview, and this is one that I've been looking forward to. And this is also an interview that I think is going to be so important. I think that what we're going to be talking about in this show is probably the most important thing that people should be learning about and discussing. And we talk about freedom. We always talk how we want freedom, and this is what we're after, but we have to figure out how to get to freedom. And that's the problem I find with people, is that people are all over the map, and a lot of people are not, they're disagreeing, they're not agreeing, they're arguing amongst each other. And I'm always trying to get to the brass tacks and the truth. As you guys know, I want to know the truth about where we live and what is being done to us. And I think most of my listeners and people watching right now know that I would hope that you guys know we're being deceived and that we are being lied to on so many levels. And I'm always looking for the truth. I tell you guys that. And a lot of the times, what we're going to be talking about was discussed. We discuss it a lot on the Crypt Rick and Jonathan show, which is on Thursdays at revolution.radio, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as you guys know. And Jonathan really got into this for a while. Like, he was learning so much about it. And I'm just kind of learning and stumbling my way through here. So I wanted to bring on somebody that really has dove into what we're going to be discussing, which is the law. And I think this is the most important thing. And I was letting my guests know right before we started recording that I'm learning with you guys. And I've learned a lot about, you hear the sovereign citizen movement. And then I've learned about admiralty law. I've learned about land law. There's so many of these different laws. And I've always thought to myself, it seems like the elite, for lack of a better word, but the people that are, controlling things, the social engineers, they seem to operate on a different level. Like they have their own law. I've always said it. I don't have a perfect way to explain it. I know my guest is going to do way better than I'm doing right now, but it's like they've taken their law, and placed it over top of natural law, I guess, of the real law. They've kind of made this proxy and put it over top. And I think they count on people not knowing the real law. And that's the best way I can describe it. But I was telling my guest, I've seen so many videos now, hundreds and hundreds of people. You see them, they get pulled over. They say the whole sovereign citizen thing. They try to tell the police about it. It never ends well that I've ever seen. They get their window smashed, they're yanked out of a car, they're arrested, and then you find them in court and they just get steamrolled. Like the judge doesn't listen to them. They kind of almost mock them. And then they always seem to lose. So I need to start at the beginning. So I want to welcome my guest. I'm so thankful they took time out. They're so busy, and I know they are. And they took a couple hours out to come and talk about something that we think is most important, and that is the law. So welcome, Ryan from BurnTheCorporateFiction. Please check out his YouTube channel. Link will be in the description. Of course, guys. Ryan, welcome to the show. We got to break this down because I think a lot of people need to hear this. And like you said, this is most important, the law.
It is. And thank you for having me on your show. And I'm very excited to be able to share the information I've spent a significant amount of time on acquiring and disseminating, understanding. So with the little bit about me, right? Or at least as far as, because I am a very private individual. That's why I don't even turn my camera on my show, stuff like that. Is I've been studying the law I've been really studying the law like hardcore for at least the past 4 years, but I've been studying for about, I'd say 11, 12 years but my studies. So when you talk about the law, my studies have been focused on the system in general, which is why I say it really came to the law once I made the connection between interested, as I'm a very spiritual oriented man. And I always have, ever since I can remember, I've always had one foot in the temporal world and the other in the spiritual, because I always have had the burning need to know, why are we here? What is the purpose of existence? Right.
Yep.
And even from the time I was a teenager, and when those two subjects converged, my interest in, so immediately you go into occultism. Occultism doesn't mean evil and at all. That's not what it means. It just means the secret teachings hidden from sight, like ocular occult. It's hidden from your view.
Right.
And so researching various like Hermeticism, stuff like that. And then when I, obviously studying the worldwide control matrix that we have, and seeing that the people who run this have that knowledge and have combined knowledge of what their understanding of creation with, say, temporal affairs. That's how they control us. And so that's when it turned to law. And then I remember I got my butt handed to me by a lawyer one time in a debate because I was going on the word, which brings me actually back to like your co-host, where you said that he's actually paid people. There's a lot of charlatans out there, and I intentionally ever watch my channel. If you ever watch it, I intentionally tell you this ends is if you apply it, but you also have to do the work. Right. So it would be fair to charge you if I was doing the work. But see, the issue is that, and you're going to understand by the end of this, hopefully by the end of this interview, like you said, we might have to do a part 2, but you're going to understand why each that's not the word, each man and woman has to do this for themselves. Right. Because only you can do it. If you're paying somebody else to do it, that's no good. Even if they know exactly what to do. Right. Which is what I'm going to explain to everyone. If they do it, then you're still an infant. And we'll get into what that actually means. If somebody else has to handle your affairs, that's how they're controlling you in the first place. That's why you use slave tickets instead of actual gold and silver. You're an infant. You get to use monopoly money. You don't get to use real money. Because you're an infant. You can't take care of yourself. You can't take care of your family, and you can do nothing without the government as your daddy. This is literally what's going on right now. It's all the administration of infant estates. Okay. And we're going to get into
that's how they look at humanity as infants. Like they need to be taken care of.
Human, we see even and that's one thing that they've done is they've taken control of the language. And it's okay that like people do not know this stuff, because they have intentionally occulted the law from you since the early 1900s, and even before they were working towards it. But they knew that your right to use the law is common law. It's a natural right. You have the right to hold your court. If you are sovereign, if you are free. And like John Jay said, we are sovereigns without subjects. That's what the people are sovereigns without subjects. John Bouvier classes people along with princes and kings. Kings, princes, and people are sovereign, right? So that means if you're not sovereign right now, somebody has a higher claim to your estate, then you're not one of the people. And you're a subclass of human or person.
Okay.
Right. So the Constitution opens with "we the people," and the 14th Amendment starts with "all persons." Persons are not people. It's a persona.
Right. Okay? They're using word magic. This is word magic to me.
Yes. No, there's no other way to put it. That's why the AI lawyer is called, it's the new AI thing for writing motions. It's called Spellbook.
They don't even hide it anymore.
Oh, they think they're hiding it. They think they're hiding, and they think they're clever. They think they're laughing in your face. But people like me and several others, we know what you're doing and what it is and what the law is. So let me get into this a little bit.
Perfect.
So basically, when this country was founded, we did not create the law that we use to create the government. The government is a byproduct of an existing form of law, as all governments generally are. You alter and improve upon the law that was in effect before you establish, whatever revolution or however you became a new international entity. You were still under a law before that, right? Well, here's how that works. There are only two forms of law in existence, and that's common law and statutory law. Okay. Common law is the ancient customs and usages of the people. Okay. And so like in Western civilization, like the Celts and the Anglos, they had common law, and it was actually what's the word I'm looking for? Blasphemy would be the closest word because I can't think of the actual word, but it was considered unlawful to write law down, because writing it down gives somebody the opportunity to use it, alter it, and lie.
Right.
Which is what we have.
Yep.
So common law is basically do no harm to anyone else. And that's what it is. And I know this is hard for people to believe, but a little brief history behind it is, so before 1066, when William the Conqueror came over to England, the Anglos had what was called the 100 courts. And so it would be communities of 100, and they governed themselves. And the men of those communities would get together in a court of 100. Now, it wasn't necessarily always 100. That's just what they were called. Mm-hmm. And they would decide the issues of the people in that area, thefts and whatever crimes were going on, right? Mm-hmm. Well, William the Conqueror came over and conquered England, and he was under Roman civil law, and he brought the Roman civil law with him. And he decided he didn't like that the people govern themselves, so he split their courts. So before I even get into that, make sure I circle back to it. You have to understand what law is. Law is your rights, right?
That's
essentially.
Right.
And your rights are derived from your status in relationship to your property. Your rights are essentially, a simple way to put it is, your rights are derived from property. So as Mark Passio has said, and I agree with him, that all crime is theft.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So all your rights come from your property, and your standing or your status is your relationship to your property. Do you have absolute claim over your property? Now, your property isn't just your home and your land or your cattle or whatever, your car. It's not just your property, is your body, your soul, your children. Friend of the court lists children as entitlements because they are entitlements of an estate. So what has happened in this country, and now, of course, so here you have Penhallow versus Stone's Administrators, right, in 1795. And if you read that case, it says that when a union is confederate and not corporate, the sovereignty resides within the state. And it's lowercase s state because it doesn't refer to the government. The state is everything in it. So when you see lowercase s state, it's referring to the people of that state, because the state, the government, is not sovereign. The government has a portion of our sovereignty that we've vested in it to do something that we don't feel like doing. That's what government is. They're our servants. We don't want to have to regulate this stuff on a regular basis. Right. We're vesting you with this portion of our sovereignty so that you can use it. But just because you vested it in the government does not mean that you have lost it. You can still use it. You can do anything the government can do, which is why you can use common law. Right. So back to my original point, law is your association with your property. Right. So what he did, and this is their trick and what they're still using to this day, because what I'm explaining ultimately led to the creation of the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta was the first time common law was written down. And if you read the Magna Carta, it is primarily concerned with estates and inheritance, and also trial by jury. And being able to create a grand jury. That's the Magna Carta created the concept of a grand jury. The grand jury is the most powerful thing in any common law country, and especially in this republic. Nixon resigned because a grand jury subpoenaed him.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. You can, and the United States versus Williams, you can form a grand jury at any time for any reason. The people can form a grand jury. It's 25 people, not 24, it's 25. That's what's in the Magna Carta. What's funny is people think the Magna Carta doesn't apply to this country. The Magna Carta is the root of this country. All that we did when we came over here and once we established our independence, was we took English common law, which was for the barons. It was for landholders and people with estates and seals, which is the whole point. You have to control your estate. You can't be a pauper or an infant. So you also have to have the lawful capacity to be free. And that's very important that people do not. If you do not know the law, you're an infant. That's why people get their ass kicked on the side of the road, because they haven't done the proper claims and put out the proper notice.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So
it makes sense.
And there's nothing they can do about it because it's what they're doing to us. They're controlling our estates basically as their parents. So I know we only have 2 hours tonight, so I'm going to try to touch upon each subject briefly.
That's perfect. We can break this down right into multiple things. This is so important, and I'm telling you, Ryan, people do not know this.
No, it's intentionally been not only hidden but buried.
Buried, right? And then, so when you say common law, can we hear people say natural law a lot? Can interchangeable? Same thing in your opinion? Natural law, common law?
Common law, natural law is not common law, but common law is man's application of natural law into society.
Okay, that makes sense. Perfect.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
So
it's man's application. Yeah. So, and essentially it's just, did you harm them? And basically what that boils down, did you steal them? Did you steal their life? Did you steal their property? Did you steal their, in the case of like like sexual conduct, did you steal their sexual liberty? Right. Their freedom to choose what they do with their body. So it's basically stealing their body. At that point, it's all theft and it's all property. When it comes to law, it's all property. And this actually is all, you can never study the law. No atheist will ever understand and comprehend the law. Right. Which is why that's one big thing that they're doing, is making sure they push this demonic, atheist, satanistic crap on everybody. Right. Because they need to distance you from the Bible. They need to distance you because the Bible is a trust indenture. It's a law book. It's a volume of sacred law is what it is. And they need to distance you from that, because if you think government or man basically is the highest authority in existence, then you're never going to find common law or know how to use it.
That makes so much sense. And you see more relativism now is rampant.
Yeah, well, that's what they want. They want that.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you watch one of my last ones, is because they're a bunch of sodomites, is what it actually is. Well, it's not the only reason, but that is a big reason. And guess what? That's unlawful at common law. You cannot be a sodomite.
That's right.
Right. So without getting too much into that, because, well, I don't mind getting into that, because I catch myself being like, well, I don't want to turn people away. But if the idea of a creator and understanding that all law is founded on the concept of a creator, even communism, it's founded on the concept of entirely denying that creator and making government God. Right. Yep. But they're all, it all revolves around a natural underlying law that enforces either contract or just basic common law. So, and that brings me back to my original point, is there's two types of law. There's common law and statutory law.
Okay.
Common law is exactly that. It's what I said earlier. It's mankind's application of natural law into society, right? And so that's where you don't steal, don't assault, don't trespass on somebody's land. Just basically, if you want to sum up common law, do not violate someone's right or their property to their property. Don't violate someone's right to their property. That's it. That's all common law is. If you're not violating somebody's right to their property, then nobody can mess with you.
Perfect.
Now, statutory law is contracts. It's the law of private conscience. So in the way that common law is an expression of natural law into society, statutory law is the enforcement of contracts, which actually stems from common law, because one of your common law rights is the right to enter into agreements with other sovereigns, with other people.
Okay.
And you have to honor those contracts because it's your word. It's in the Bible. I'm telling you, if you think all this stuff both of these forms of law were were created by Christian countries. So statutory civil law was Rome under the church, right? And before the church, but then it evolved under the church, because it was definitely before the church as well. That's actually, arbitration is one of the oldest forms of statute, or it's not even really statutory law, honestly, but it's one of the oldest forms of law, which is why we can use it to smack them. Well, it is, because it's the enforcement of agreements. So it's statutory law, but it's one of the oldest forms. But all of this is colored by, and when I say Christian, I don't mean Protestant. I mean, there was, at the time that the Magna Carta was written, there was only one church.
Right.
right? So
Yep.
there was no Protestantism. There was no bunch of different churches. That's not a thing, right? So England made its church independent, but it was still in alignment with the Catholic Church in Rome. And at the time of the Magna Carta, they did this because, and that again illustrates my point, in order to enforce the common law or to make sure that the common law protects them, they had to have that church, because the law comes from the priest class. And even common law, it's the Druids, the priest class did it, you know, the Anglos, same thing. That's how they always, the Vikings, the priest class would orate the law. And actually the Viking influence on England was where they came, where they understood the idea. And there's a lot to Norse mythology and to understanding what they believed in, right? There is.
I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah. Marvel's made a mockery of it, but there's a lot to that. And they brought to England the concept of power coming from the people to the king, not from the king down to the people, because you only get to be king because we don't cut your head off.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's pretty much what the barons told King John in 1215. They wrote the Magna Carta. They wrote it as if he wrote it. And then they cornered him at Runnymede, a battlefield, when his Roman counterparts were off on a conclave, and they cornered King John and they said, look, you're going to sign this or we're going to cut your head off. And the reason they did that is because the Normans brought that Roman law into England and then started using it to take their property. So what King William the Conqueror did in 1066, once he came over there, he abolished their common law courts and he split them and said, okay, you guys can deal with these matters temporal, but anything to do with the inheritance of land or the dead goes to my ecclesiastical court over here that I'm creating. And he gave power over that to the priest class. So then you end up mixing common law with this Roman civil law in a way where it creates usufructory situations. Usufruct is, you know what usufruct is? Well, for
but I'm learning.
For the benefit of the audience, usufruct or usufructuary is when the title is split and one person has a legal title, the other person has an equitable title. So one person has a superior claim to the property and they allow another person to use it. So usufruct is the right to use, but the person who has superior title gets to tell you how to use that property because it's actually theirs and they're just giving you the right to use it. Well, that's what's going on today. As United States citizens, 14th Amendment citizens, right? They're administrating your property. They're telling you, they give you the right to use it, but they tell you have to use it as they tell you to use it, which includes the registration, the motor vehicle codes, and even down to your own body. That's where the drug laws come from. Oh, you're damaging the property. And this all goes back to the doctrine of uses, the law of uses, where when it comes to, because everything is probate right now. I see there's so much to get into here, and I know I'm bouncing around, but I'm
this is fascinating, Ryan. I'm kind of, my jaw is actually dropping right now because I'm just like, this is so much deeper than I even imagined. And I know how messed up things are, and I know how they're deceiving people, but like we're really getting into the root of this, of what's going on. And it makes sense because I was saying at the beginning, like, it seems like there's two laws and they're kind of mashed together. And it makes sense why people are lost. And
well, they never abolished common law, and everything starts in common law. When the birth certificate's signed, you're pledging, you're being pledged to the state, and then the state pledges you to the United States corporation. The United States corporation mortgages, but it's not you, it's your estate, and more specifically, it's the productive value of the estate. So it's the same as if they were dealing with a farm that's going to produce fruit. That's how they look at you.
Jeez.
Right. And it's because you've never claimed your estate. And that's a very basic principle of law that is not taught, not even to lawyers, but is true, is that the very first political subdivision before government or anything even comes into existence is the house. And a house is not a structure built, well, I mean, in a way it is, but the house is your family. You are the very first government. Your family is the very first form of government where everybody voluntarily complies with one another towards a common goal. And they recognize this in ancient times. And that's where you have houses and seals. I mean, people can think of Game of Thrones, right? Like you got the Lannisters, the Starks, and the Targaryens and on. They've got their houses and their steels and all the people under them, right, that are not sovereign, but they're sovereigns. And the whole show is about how they deal in war with each other, right? Well, see, here in this republic, we had the opportunity, and we were for a short period of time, an entire union of sovereign houses. I mean, with the exception, you always have the poor, you always have the crazy, you always have the indigent. And that's where they came up with this. That's why we had to create institutions to deal with lunatics and infants. And we had to bring probate here, which is what William the Conqueror created in 1066. That's called probate. Okay. And that's where the will's probated. And so essentially, and this is where it got adopted into common law, and it's in the Magna Carta. And so if someone dies intestate without a will, then the property is sheets to the state. Now that specific part's not, but that's called the doctrine of a sheet. And a sheeting means that no property shall go to waste, right? And it is the responsibility of the crown or the government vested with the sovereign authority of the people, as in our republic, to take that land, administer it, which means take care of it, and resell it, auction it back off so that it ends up into the hands of the people again, right? But they've took this whole understanding of property. They brought a registry system over here, which splits the title automatically. When you register something, you're giving it to the crown saying, here, keep this safe and let me use it, and I'll use it how you want me to. That's what registration is. We don't have, I mean, we do now, but like our original common law doesn't have a registry. Common law has a record system. You file a record. You don't submit an application for registration. And those words all mean beggar and submission. Submit is submitting, and apply is begging. It's plying. You're begging, right?
This is so crazy, right? Like I'm sure you're used to people kind of being speechless, but like I'm just thinking of registry, and then when you register your car or your vehicle, it's so
You're handing
messed
it
up.
over.
You're handing it over and asking them permission to use what you think you own.
But see, it's all just, you have to register because you're already registered. So you did that with, well, your parents did that with your whole essence of the whole essence of your being. Wow. Has already been handed over to be administered, right?
Okay.
So that's what happened in 1066. He introduced this court, and what the court was doing was screwing the barons and their heirs out of their lands. And people were dying, and this was another problem that ended up with the doctrine of mortmain, right? Where I think it was King Edward, he said, you guys are not leaving you do not leave your property to an incorporeal entity, which means the church. So living men and women have heirs. Corporations have successors. Corporations never die.
That's true.
The church can never die. So what happens when all this land is being left to the church? Well, the church isn't going to die and leave it to anybody else. So it's a form of usurpation. You see what I'm saying? So
I do see it. I'm just thinking about it's going to take, I'm going to have to listen back to this probably a few times to really wrap my head around it, because this is a lot. And just the lie that they're putting upon people. So let me, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm sure I'm going to be right on some of this, but I'm trying to think it through. Like, so if you own 100 acres of land, and you pay, okay, let me put it this way, and I'm probably going to veer, I hope I'm not veering you off your train of thought, but we're talking about land and stuff.
The stuff, so you're good.
Yeah, so I own 100 acres. I've paid off that property. So it's like I own this.
What'd you pay it with? What'd you use to pay for it? That's the question.
Money. Right.
No, what money? We have no money.
See, I knew that this is where this was going to go. So you don't technically own it.
They've taken away our capacity to even actually do business, which they cannot do. And you can still use this to smack them upside the head because of what they're doing.
Right.
But the credit of our estate, the government has nothing of its own. It never has. Its very creation its essence is created by the people. Its authority is vested to it by the people. It has nothing of its own. So what is it borrowing against? You.
Me. Yeah.
Right. Except for it's not even money. They became insolvent in the 70s. And in the 30s, they took away our access to gold and silver unlawfully, by the way. Well, here's where it gets complicated, because it was not technically unlawful, because the people had been made so ignorant that they were infants and did not know how to counter this. But not all of them, but the majority of them. Me personally, not to get too far into another subject, but I think this whole conversion over to this administrative system leading up to the bankruptcy and the Federal Reserve note and all that, and then the following conversion. But I think that the people that were fighting, I think that's why they had so many asylums. And they had, because that's one of the reasons they can take control of your estate, is if you're insane.
That would make a lot of sense. So if you know what's going on and you're trying to expose it or bring it to light, they throw you into an asylum.
And
It's a good
take
way
your
to
estate in. Yeah.
take your estate, and you're crazy, get away.
So it's not just taking it, you become property of your estate when they take your estate. But see, that's not technically how they did it. So they're using English, like I said, because law doesn't specifically belong to any nation. Okay, there are bodies of law that exist among nations, and common law is the most ancient. And every Western European country, and I'm not sure if Australia, because they were started as a penal colony.
Right.
So I don't know if they ever had access to it, but I would like to think that they would have once they became their own, because there would be smart people that know, well, if I'm not under anybody's contract or yoke, then it's common, because common law is the default law. The only way you can, like I told you, there's only two types of laws: statutory, which is the law of private conscience. It's the law that's written by man. And in order to be subject to that law, you have to agree to it contractually. Okay. So I believe it's Cruden v. Neal, I want to say it is. And it says that all men are independent of the institutions of their fellow men, absent in a state of nature. All men are absent, or are independent of the institutions of their fellow men, absent consent. And that's from the 1700s in Superior Court, right? So on the record, and that's a fact, and that is the state of being for everyone in the world, unless you're under a contract. Then you enter into statutory law. Now listen, and thanks to the Magna Carta, there's actually been an entire body of case law in common law, in forms and actions, and it's much more loose and like in the name, common or friendly, as opposed to statutory law, which nowadays there's something called attorney work product doctrine, and they make everything so complicated, so you intentionally have to hire them to use their law. Well, F their law, dude, because it's not even law. In order to be under your law or even deal with you merchants, right, because that's what they are, and that's what they're using. UCC is Lex Mercatoria, or the law merchant. It's just international law merchant now. In order to even be under law merchant, I have to have contracted with you, right? So everybody who's watching is going to be like, well, how do we get rid of it? Well, here's how common law works. You're sovereign as one of the people. You can hold court the same way that the government can hold court, right? But you can hold common law court once you learn how to do it, and you have to create a house seal. This is the most important part. A seal, let me see. Do I still have that definition up? Let me see here.
This is so interesting, Ryan.
So from Bouvier's dictionary, okay, Bouvier's dictionary, which is the 1856 edition, it is adapted specifically to common law and the Constitution of the United States. So every definition in here, and you'd be surprised, the full title is a dictionary adapted to the Constitution and laws of the United States, with references to civil and other forms of foreign law, because civil law is foreign. It's Roman, statutory. It's the emperor thinks you should do this, or the pope thinks you should do this, or whatever, right? Or the king, however you want to look at it. It's foreign. It's the law of private conscience. Our law is common law. Mankind does not write common law, never has written common law. We've only written about common law. Does that make sense?
It sure does. Yes.
And that's our default law in this country. So your courts of record, you create. The definition of a court is the sovereign and his suite, right? But it's actually suite. And the suite is your courtiers, the people in your court. Well, now it's pieces of paper that you submit are your court. They go and they stand as various participles of a court case, right? So, but that's and the presumption is always that you're being honest, and that's another big thing, right? Because you seal it. Now, the seal, this is from Bouvier's Law Dictionary, it says the public seal of a foreign state, which you are to the United States. Michigan is its own republic. Our union is Confederate. Michigan is a Confederate state. I've proven it. All states are Confederate because Articles of Confederation created them. And Confederate doesn't mean racist, doesn't mean redneck, doesn't mean the flag that everybody thinks of. Confederate is a type of union. And a confederation is where each member of that union has equal power and are independently sovereign of one another. And they agree by compact or covenant to come together towards a common goal, which would be the economic prosperity and security of the collective republics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the federal government was created by the state governments, actually in a totally filthy, dirty way in order to open the door for everything that's happening, but we can still reverse it very easily. It's just because they counted on making us ignorant. And the word federal comes from the word feudal. And it's basically a league or an association that's been vested with a usufructory use of something. Now, remember that word usufruct. They have the lower title of the sovereignty that the states hold, and the states have a lower title of the sovereignty that we hold. And this feudal government was supposed to be very limited, never deal with the people in general unless it was a territory or it was within their capital, which is its own city-state. And they're entirely foreign to us. They're a creation of the people. They're not our leaders. They're the servants of our servants.
That's great. That's so crazy.
Okay. So they were never supposed
I'm sorry, I'm just blown away. Like we're just getting started, Ryan, and I'm just like, this is so deep. And I'm just then just put a pin in your thought, Ryan, because I'm just thinking out loud right now, but you're making great points, and these are kind of things I talk about on my show. Is I've been saying, like, and it's kind of making sense. The way you're describing it is that you were saying earlier that, you know, the first government is basically your family, and then I think to myself, what are they doing now? They're destroying the family unit. I talk about this all the time. They know. I've always said there's power in family, and I've just known that a strong family is so powerful, and so you see them destroying that, and I'm just like and then, you know, it's like you're saying, it's like anything good or anything that touches on what you're speaking about, they pollute it, like they reverse it, and
no, we allow them through our ignorance. Here's the thing.
God, you know what I mean, though, what I'm saying? I hope it makes sense.
So we have to learn the law, and not just the types of law. So there's 5 jurisdictions in American jurisprudence, and jurisdiction doesn't mean like, you know, this county's jurisdiction versus, those are venues, and what law they're using determines the jurisdiction. Okay, there's 5 jurisdictions in American jurisprudence. John Bouvier writes about them, the institutions of American law. He's got volumes of this treatise. I have it on my computer. There's 5 jurisdictions. Okay, we're not going to get into them right this second, but you need to know why and how those jurisdictions come about. Right? So
that makes sense, because I hear that in court cases I've been watching. Like I hear people say, like, do you have jurisdiction? And well, like I said, they just kind of, the judge basically ignores them.
They're experts at psychological manipulation and playing stupid. They know exactly what they're asking. They're just banking on, and usually they're right, that the defendant doesn't know what jurisdictions are. And usually they do not. They think they do. They know a couple buzzwords like maritime admiralty, or
I was going to ask you about that. I was going to say, like, are you talking, do you hear people say that, or is this a maritime court? What jurisdiction are?
Well, here's what they actually are. They're all of them except for common. They've tried, what they've done is they've taken separate jurisdictions and they've fucking put them in, or excuse my language. Sorry,
that's okay. That's okay.
They put it in a bottle and they shook it together, and it's like mixing oil, water, and sand. Right. It's like mixing oils, water, and sand. So eventually, if they stop writing contracts and making new codes and trying to adapt to this problem that was created, adapt it, because all they're doing is trying to plug holes in the ship of different problems that are happening now, because they're mixing things that don't go together.
Right.
Right. So the 5 jurisdictions of American jurisprudence. Well, first, let me say what I was going to say about the seal. John
Perfect.
Bouvier says the public seal of a foreign state, which you're a foreign state. State doesn't just refer to, like, everybody thinks a state is a state or a country, because that's what Department of State deals with other countries, because those countries are other states. That's why the word state always meant country. Anyways, right? So what we were was a union of countries called the United States of America. So when you say the term United States of America, you're referring to a union of countries, like the European Union. But we actually were set up the right way, not in a dystopian way like the EU is. But the word state, your house is a state. Once you create your house and you get a seal, that's your political protection from all other states. And what a state is a state of being. That's what state means. Right. That's where the term estate, and what your estate is your interest in property. Okay. And so estate's an interesting word, because it not only means the amount of interest you have in a property, but it also refers to all the property you own at law. And so where the status of your estate's in probate. So let's break it down like this. Property is acquired by will. The material world, like a stick on the ground, has no will of its own. You pick the stick up and whittle it into a staff. It's now your property. Nobody can take that. You've infused your essence, and things become your property by your will. So that's why when you die, and this is literally an ancient esoteric understanding of law, that's why they've existed from antiquity. When you die, you leave a last will. And that last will is supposed to echo out into the world of man, right? And by man, I mean man and woman. So people understand that man is mankind, right? We each have our equal and opposite roles, or complementary rather than opposite. But so you put forth your last will regarding your property, because your property was only acquired by your will in the first place. And you put out your last will to the realm of man, and you say, this is how this is supposed to be done. And in that will, you appoint an executor, and the executor pretty much does the rest. He'll appoint trustees. He'll make sure it's executed, and that whatever your last will said is carried out to its completion. Now, this is where you get to the concept of an inter vivos, or set decay trust. A living trust is what that means. And so if the beneficiary, say somebody's going to die, and the beneficiary, their son or something, is a moron and doesn't know how to manage himself or his affairs or anything like that, and the father's not going to leave his estate to him, but he wants him taken care of. So now the son becomes a beneficiary. The father appoints an executor and says, hey, I need you to run my estate, make sure it's taken care of until such and such comes of age, because obviously you're going to pick another heir. But while you're running this estate, this son is going to be a beneficiary. And so beneficiary has no control over the estate, receives a part of the benefit of the estate, and cannot be the heir. So and this is where a lot of confusion comes in. People are like, you want to be the benefit. You never want to be the beneficiary, ever. Going to jail is a benefit. The way they look at this is they're administering infant estates for reform. So sending you to jail is a benefit. And if you're a beneficiary, then go ahead, go to jail, because that's your benefit. You're being unruly right now, and you're not doing what we're telling you with the property that we control. So here's your benefit. Go to jail, or go to an asylum or something, right?
Yeah. It's just amazing, the power of words. Like, that's what I'm really learning. Like, I'm understanding now. And I've always said that, like we said earlier, it's word magic. And that's exactly what it is. Like, people don't know the true meaning of the word estate or benefit, like what you're breaking down right now, Ryan. A lot of people have no idea
because
what
trust
words
law
truly mean. Yeah.
You can only understand trust law if you understand the history of what a trust is, or usufructuary, or estates, or any of all this stuff goes back to is understanding law, right? So comprehending, well, we always stand under real law. So when the Constitution, Article 3, Section 2, lays out the jurisdiction of the judiciary, and it says that the judicial branch shall have jurisdiction in all cases at law and in equity, right? So it makes a distinction between law and equity, because there is only one law. Now you have Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, Rule 2, that says one form of action, the civil action, which is equity. It's the enforcement of contracts. And so there is only one law. Anytime in old law that you see the word law written in the 1800s before the Civil War, anytime you see the word law written, they're talking about the common law. That is the only law. If they're talking about another form of quote unquote law, private law, they refer to it by its actual jurisdictional designation, like equity. In this country, we only have, well, now we had 5 jurisdictions, but let me finish this former point about the will. So if you're an infant or a beneficiary or become a beneficiary, if you're an infant or unable to manage your affairs and the will is intestate, meaning that the person whose property it was isn't able to appoint an executor, then that's what an administrator is. The word administration only refers to trusts. If you look up the word administer or administration in Bouvier's dictionary, it says the very first word says trusts. Now you look, the Administrative Procedures Act is how they created all these district courts, because all they're doing is administering infant estates. So here, look, we'll look at, I know we're on a radio show, and the viewers can't see this, so I'm going to read this.
Well, I'm going to put it on YouTube, so we're recording it. It's perfect. So yeah, definitely check it out, guys, while Ryan's bringing this up. If you are listening on radio, I give you a first listen of any of my interviews are on radio, but please go to my YouTube channel. This will be up there, and you can check out what Ryan's showing. I'm sure he might put it on his channel. I don't know, but check this out if you guys can come over to the channel.
Okay, so I put it on there to share.
Okay, so I'm learning how to do it. So I just add
so
to
you just
page.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. I'm learning as we go.
Okay, so this is Title 1, U.S. Code, Section 8. So the words person, human being, child, and individual, including born alive infant, right? So here's the thing. In determining the meaning of any act of Congress, that means anything in the United States Code, in determining the meaning, this is a blanket definition for these words, right? Or of any ruling, which is their administrative stuff, right? Regulation, administrative, interpretation, and all of he says, and of the various administrative bureaus, right? And this, remember, administration is the executor. So the executor is appointed by will, administrator is appointed by law. So that's when the property escheats for lack of will to the state. And now the state has to take control of it and maintain it until a proper owner acquires it, right? So except for they just forgot about that last part, and they're not allowing anybody to acquire it, and they're just administering it now. They're just stuck in this middle state of administration, right? Because that's what the doctrine of escheat is. So like if you die and you appoint an executor, the executor carries out your will, right? And that's his job. That's what he executes your last will. And then the property takes on a new owner, and then it continues to their last will, and so on. So if you don't have a will, it's called intestate.
I was going to ask you about that. Like, what if you don't have a will? I'm assuming it just your property gets absorbed.
That's how they're controlling us. So if you don't have a will, but say there is an heir or somebody that's dependent, but they're not of age, right, on the estate, then the government, the state or the crown, depending on what country you're in, they then appoint an administrator, and the administrator decides what the will of the property is until the heir comes of age. So they literally get to decide what to do with the property, but they have to recognize the heir. So if the heir comes forth, and that's what the Magna Carta is all about, and that's actually what the Court of Wards and Liveries was about, and the Court of Wards after the London fire. So you have to understand, this isn't the first time they've done this. This is just the best they've done it. They did it with the London fires in 1666. Okay, so they shut down the Court of Wards and Liveries, which was where heirs came to sue out their livery, which means they came to prove that they were of age and capable of managing their affairs. And then they were given their estates per the Magna Carta. They were given control of their estates without fee, right? Because you can't, like, it was theirs the whole time. So you just have to give it to them. This is all laid out in the Magna Carta. This whole thing that they're doing, the Magna Carta actually, kind of enabled them to do this if we're ignorant, which is exactly what it did, which is why I think the Magna Carta is a double-edged sword. That's why the barons, the same people who own the corporations and everything right now, were the ones who did it. I think it was intentional way to lawfully take control of our wills, because that's what happens. So if you die in test, so they've probated your will. Everything comes back to your will, right? So when they take control of your property, because through legal process, by determining that you're not capable of managing your affairs, they take your will. Now you have to do what they say. You cannot do what you deem proper as a sovereign. They've stolen your will. That's what's going on. So let me get back to this. So in determining the meaning of, to keep it simple, of anything that they do in code, right? The words person, human being, child, and individual shall include. So this term right here, I want to give the listeners a better understanding of statutory construction. So remember, statutory is the issuance of private law, the law of man or group of men's private conscience, and that's how they're. It's not actual common law. It's whatever they deem to be proper. And so it's when they're creating these, the word shall means that's an absolute. There's no question, shall. So like must and may are synonymous terms at law, but shall is without question. You shall, that means there is no question about it, right? No option.
Yeah.
And when it says shall include, now to include, if you look up the word include in any law dictionary right now, include means contain within. So where it deceptively looks like it's adding to a general definition, it's just adding to it, it's actually restricting the definition to just this. So if I say, an example, another podcaster I like to listen to, he says, is if I say the word trees includes oaks and elms, then under that statute, a pine tree is not a tree. Now, if I say a tree includes, or a tree means including but not limited to, now I've just expanded upon the definition and left it open to its original definition. But if I only say include, that's why you have the term including but not limited to, because include limits unless you say but not limited.
I get it.
Does that make sense? So now what they're saying is the words person, human being, child, and individual, let's just keep it simple, means only every infant member of the species Homo sapien who is born alive at any stage of development, which means if you're a person or a human being or a child and you're 70, you're an infant. Doesn't matter. I actually have another common law book open right here, and I'll show you. This is actually a common law defense to stop a case. So let me come back to you real quick, and then I'm going to share this.
This is so fascinating.
We want to go window. There you go. Handbook of the Common Law from 1895. You can find great common law resources on here. So I'm going to zoom in for you guys. Now, here you have the cause of action, right? So up here you have or no, it's right here. Sorry. So this is a declaration or complaint, right, against the defendant, and this is how to write a common law. This is it. This is how you do it. You go down to your court of record, put your seal on it, file it with the clerk, and boom, whoever you're doing this against, you have them served, and they're bound, even if they don't want to be, even if they think they're not. Because then what you can do is you can give them 120 days by doing notices, 3 notice of, 90 or, 120, 90, 60. Then you give them a 30 days to default. And then once you default them lawfully, and this is all under your seal, you take it to a private court of arbitration. You can get an award and put a lien on their property. People have already done it. I have the paperwork on my computer. It works.
Wow. So so when we're talking about seals, should every family have their own seal?
They should, but here's the thing. I have to give this warning. If you do not know what you're doing, you need to be sure you understand what's going on before you go attack these people.
I agree. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, actually, we don't attack anybody. That's a wrong way to put it. Before you go and defend yourself using the law with these people, you have to know it. Okay. And the reason I say that is because if you're an infant and under indenture and you're doing it wrong, you don't know how to do it, they can actually get you for impersonating a public official. That's what they do to people that have no idea. But when you know what you're doing, you file all your paperwork on the record first, your declarations, your notices, your establishment of your house, your seal, and all this gets put on the record with a 30-day time limit of, hey, anybody who has a higher claim, come and get it. Once it's on the public record at your county court is your court. Okay. And once it's on that record, it stands as a fact at law. Then they can't do that because now you are one of the people, right? So the people would be that's how I think they stretch the idea of public official, because you're pretending to be one of the people. That's what I think. Now, and that's not to scare anybody off, because this is really simple once you understand what you're doing. It's actually the best form of law. And it's easy, and there's nothing they can do about it. But the seal is important. And now the thing about using the seal is everything that you put under your house seal, or if you make your seal the seal of the court. So for instance, and I'm glad you asked that question, the original Illinois Constitution, or I'm sorry, is it Indiana Constitution? I showed it on like one of my last couple of shows. Mm-hmm. The original Constitution, when they were doing the schedule for the election of governor and all that, which every original Constitution has a schedule at the end of it of how all this stuff's going to be put into effect. And when for the election of governor, it says the governor shall use his private seal until a state seal can be made for the office, essentially. Right. And right there, that tells you it's the presumption. Anybody that's going to be eligible to be a governor is going to have a house and a seal.
Okay, I got it.
Right. So like I was reading you, the public seal of a foreign state proves itself, and the public act, decrees, and judgments exemplified under the seal are received as true and genuine. So the seal automatically acts as its own consideration, its own value. You're putting basically the honor of your house and your word. That's your word. That's your bond. Boom. You're putting it on there. What I'm telling you, you need to disprove it, because this is enough consideration to validate what I'm saying. They can never disprove that. What are you going to prove? I'm not alive? How are you going to do that?
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it makes sense.
Are you going to prove you're not administering my estate while you bring me into an administrative hearing to have that conversation? You jackass. No, it's not going to be a thing. Right. So
right.
Nothing that once you get this stuff on the record and then you put them on notice, you put your county on notice, the county clerk, sheriff, governor, secretary of state, and you just put them on notice, have them served, or certified mail copy, whatever you got to do, have evidence that you sent them notice of your standing in your estate. And that in that notice, they have the opportunity to assert a superior claim. They're not going to, because they do not have one. Once you do that, that's it. Now you can run them over. And when they don't do what you want, you can take them to arbitration. But that gets into a whole other, then you got to put out an open contract to the world on the record of anybody attempting. It's called a performance contract. If you attempt to mess with my estate, you're agreeing to be a trustee, and you must put up a $3 million bond for fiduciary malfeasance. And you agree to be taken to a court of arbitration of my choice, and you agree to the terms of the award and all this, and you forfeit your estate and this and that, and you just basically lace this thing up like a bear trap.
Wow. Okay.
And as soon as they step on your rights, right, as soon as they try to administer your estate, say a creditor's trying to garnish your wages or anything like that, right, you fucking send them that notice.
And then there they go.
And then by continuing to do it, they have contracted with you, and that stands as a fact. They have, because you told them, you say, if you keep doing this, I've already claimed this. You have no right to this. You can't administer it now. There's nothing to administer. You cannot administer my estate. You have no claim to it. And if you continue, I'm presuming that you want to work for me. So you need to insure yourself. And we need $3 million bond to insure you. And then if you screw up, that $3 million bond is that you're liable. It's forfeit. It's mine. And you know they're going to screw up, because you know what? These attorneys, most of these attorneys have no idea the stuff I'm telling you.
I was just going to ask you that, Ryan. I was going to say, do most judges and attorneys know what you're speaking about? I was just going to ask you that.
They do not know the law. They know process. Now, judges more than attorneys will be, there'll be more judges who know what I'm saying than attorneys, but hardly any attorney knows this.
Jesus.
But the district attorneys and the district judges, I do think that they have a certain amount of knowledge of this. That's why they get a little shook so I'm helping a guy in New York deal with a traffic ticket. He got the traffic ticket. He contacted me, and I told him what to do. I said, hey, look, very first thing, we're going to need to get you paperwork on the record. But before that, just hurry up and go down and file an at-law counterclaim. And now people don't realize this, but if you go tell the clerk at your circuit court, or apparently district, because that's where he did it, which makes sense, because in New York, one of the originals, they would probably have common law venue in every court, but you should always have access to common law, but definitely your county court. When you go to your county courthouse and you go to that county clerk and you have your declaration or whatever claim it is, right? And you say, I need this filed at law. Okay. And that's where we're going to get into the jurisdictions in just a moment. But if you'll excuse me, maybe take over, talk to the audience for a second. I'll be right back. And I'm
not a problem. Yeah, not a problem.
Yep.
All right, perfect. Yeah, guys. So interesting stuff here. And this, I've always said that, guys. And how many times have you heard me say that? This goes so much deeper than people realize, and even more than I realized. And I've heard some of this stuff, but I keep saying it, it's word magic, guys. They know, they're speaking a different language. They know the power of words and their true meanings. And people, the common people around here just don't. And how many people even ever consider listening to what we're speaking about or looking into it? But this is the root of true knowledge that we have to have. And it's just, it makes sense when the way Ryan's breaking it down. When you start listening to this, it makes sense of how they're getting away with what they're doing. It just makes sense to me that this is. I've always known that they're operating on a different, like a different level. And I've always said that. And we were saying it earlier during the show. Like it's like they've, how do the elite get away with everything, and how do they seem to walk between the raindrops, kind of thing? We all probably think that. Like, how are they doing this? Because they know this stuff.
I'm back, and it's because they use common law to deal with each other, by the way, or
that's what I'm saying.
Law,
yeah.
Or international law, for instance, which is kind of a form of common law when you're dealing with how sovereigns deal with each other. It's kind of like an international common law in a sense where, like, it's kind of a mixture because they have to honor each other's contracts and stuff, but they both recognize each other as sovereign. That's just so. But the whole thing is like the whole process starts in common law. Also, the pledging, you're born free, and then you're immediately pledged, right? So your estate is pledged, and you're abandoned. So they simultaneously use two presumptions. The birth certificate is a bond and a pledge, and
but how is that? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ryan, but this is what I hear so much about the birth certificate, and so how is that even legal? I had no say in anything. My parents did it.
That's why. Right there. Well, and it's because also your parents are infants. So this is what I was going to get to. The document I'm showing right here. It shows the contested. Now remember, because United States citizens are automatically presumed to be infants. So when you walk in under that status, that standing, you're presumed to be an infant, and the court is not actually a court. It's an administrative hearing. Traffic ticket is an administrative hearing. Anything is really an administrative hearing. And then even when there's actually a crime, like say you harm somebody or whatever, they still bring it into equity and make it contractual and make it a breach of trust. You see what I'm saying? Well, it's probate is what it is. But it gets a little bit more muddied when you get into actual crime, but they still are able to do it because on its very basis, it still is the administration of your estate. So here's the thing. Now, the infant, we just in Title I, Section 8. Now, here are some defenses he can use. Okay, so we can go through demur at some point, probably not on your show tonight, but basically you agree to the facts, not the law. So if you're going to demur, you'd say, they'd say, but you were going 70 and a 50. And you can say, well, I come upon a demur. Like, I agree with you. This is a fact. I was doing that. I disagree that I'm subject to your stupid code that says that I cannot do that because you don't control my property. That's a demurs where you agree with the facts but disagree with the law. You're like, I'm not under that law. It's a private law. I don't agree to that. I have never agreed to that. And since I found out that you guys were using presumption to force me to be under that agreement, I have since claimed my entire estate, created my house, my seal, my political protection, right? And now you have me in here unlawfully. Like, this isn't even a thing. That's a demur. It would be an example of how we'd use one today. But right here, so to the jurisdiction of the court, right? So action brought in wrong court, or court for no, or court no jurisdiction over subject matter, right? So, or so this is how we get them, which is what I just said with that demur. That's to the jurisdiction. This is an equity court, right? And which is really, it's actually probate, but they really hide that it is. But I'm going to explain exactly why it is probate. Everything's being run through probate. In fact, the guy at Vocational Science of Freedom, he found a judge's probate manual from Georgia that says that they run, he says, in any jurisdiction where there, or in any part of the state where there is no state court, and it says with lowercase s state. So lowercase s state is the actual sovereign common law state. It represents the people within that state. Capital S state is the corporate union that happened after 1871. Of basically all the states ceding their sovereignty as conquered territories to the federal, or the state government ceding their territories to the federal corporation as conquered territories, and becoming basically franchises of the same. Now, but here, if you want to get to the disability of the plaintiff, this, you could literally eliminate a common law case just like this. It says, for example, plaintiff is an alien enemy, an infant, a lunatic, a married woman, etc. Now, see, the married woman thing is interesting because, like, an individual, like an unmarried woman could bring her suit, right?
Right.
But once a woman marries, she comes under the house of the man. Now, this isn't misogynistic like the communists, like that's how they break down the family.
That's how they twist it. Exactly. Yep.
The reason that the woman comes under the house of the man is, one, that's in the Bible. It's what happens. And secondly, is because the man, objectively, you can think about it like this. The man is the protector, generally, right? We're the protectors. Court is civilized warfare. What court does is tries to eliminate the need for us to kill each other.
That's a great way to explain it, actually. Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what court is.
Yep.
It's, we're going to settle our disagreements as men, right? Instead of being barbarians and just hacking to death, right? So this is civilized warfare is what court is. And that's why the man, in the same way he would go off with his, his musket or his sword and shield or whatever to fight for his family and for his country, is the same reason why the man is a legal representative of the political subdivision known as the House. So this is how you deal with issues with other houses. Now, this tells you right here, if you're an infant, you have no access to the common law. What did Article 1, Section 8 declare everybody to be?
An infant.
An infant.
Yep. Yep.
And everything, and everything that comes with that, which means your estate, because the will was, or the estate is considered intestate, which means without a will, then that allowed them to escheat the estate. And they did this all through the ignorance of the people. That's why and so this is the nexus that ties in the rest of the things that everybody knows about. The Rockefeller controlled the education system, the Globe lie, all that stuff, right, was all created to take you away from your access to your sovereignty and your common law court, your court of record, right? So that they could then administer your estate, because an atheist is in the same class as an infant. Actually, you can't go to court because you have to be honest and truthful. That requires oath taking. And if you're an atheist, what are you gonna swear to?
Exactly. Right.
And
that's why they're pushing the whole atheist agenda and the destruction.
That's the whole scientism thing. Yes, that's 100%. And it all comes back to this, the law, because this is what they're really after, is to make sure you never find out who you are and what you can do. But you can just simply do this. And that's what Mojo did in New York. And he went and filed an at-law counterclaim, right? And he did a pretty good job, for his first time. And it basically threw gum in the whole gears of the court. And you had the district attorney calling him in saying, what if we drop it down to a $25 parking ticket? He says, for what? Because he understands, he comprehends what I'm saying, and he comprehends the way it's supposed to work. And he's like, there's nothing to have a deal about. I didn't do anything wrong. Right? Like, I'm not under your code, your private agreement. You're trying to tell me how to use my property. And I'm a living man. I'm sovereign. I'm free. Right? And I have not entered into an agreement with you. Right?
It's all about contract. I'm catching it. Like, I mean, I got, like, this is so much to take in, right? And as you know that, but I'm starting to understand it. Yeah, like, that's why I appreciate what you're doing, because most people do not even have any idea what you're scratching. Like, as I was saying, like, everybody wants freedom. They want their freedom, but you have to know this stuff, and they count on us not knowing it. That's the thing that, and they're not going to tell us. And so I'm just kind of giggling when you're telling me about the guy in New York, and I'm like, I can imagine the lawyers when they see the people, like, they
I have
fear
a video.
people.
The judge asked him for permission. Called himself after, but asked him for permission to look over the writ, because he is coming in as superior. You have to remember that judge is only superior if he's an infant. If not, that judge is a servant, a trustee, and can shut up or be held in contempt.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
It'd be the same thing as like somebody who's in the king's court trying to fucking tell the king to sit down or something. What do you think's going to happen? And he's going to lose his head.
He's going to lose his head. Exactly. Yeah. Contract. It's all, because you hear all this. Like, you hear a lot of this. And anybody that's looking into this and is very new at it, like I am, you're hearing these words. Like, like you said perfectly, they know the buzzwords. So they'll bring up contract and sovereign and all these words. But if you don't, you really have to, I'm gathering, you really have to know this if you're going to go to, I guess, battle.
Yep.
If I was a good way to put it.
You're arming yourself with knowledge. My people perish for lack of knowledge. That's what you have to arm. You have to know, because they're definitely not going to tell you, and they're going to play stupid. But then, just like in Mojo's case, when excuse me, I did it twice.
That's okay.
When you call them out on what they're doing, you know what you're doing. He straight told them. He said, "You're not going to administer my estate." That's what's got him so special. He's like, oh, he doesn't just have an idea of what we're doing. He knows what we're doing.
Yep.
Like, he's not spouting stuff like marriage, because the first time when he went in for his arraignment and they went ahead and just decided he was an infant, moved it to trial, and I looked at the transcripts, not only did they redact the transcript by saying inaudible, like they couldn't hear him when he's saying, I'm a living man and all that stuff, right? Said inaudible, because I've heard that stuff before for people who don't actually know. And when he said, what jurisdiction is this? And the judge says, well, it's the jurisdiction of Leicester County or whatever, right? And he's like, no, that's not what I meant. Well, they redacted a great deal of that, and they asked him about jurisdiction and stuff, right? And what they're doing is seeing whether or not they're going to be able to get away with it. That's why they were testing him. Mojo did not know that. So then once I read through the transcripts, seeing what they were doing, I told him what to do. And he went and did it and filed an at-law counterclaim of trespass on the case, on the cop and the judge. And now they adjourned it. Wow. And he said, I need time to look this over. And that's what he did. He said, he asked him first. He said, I was going to ask for some wait, no, I'm not going to ask anything. I am going to adjourn this. No more motions. Because what I told Mojo after I listened to that recording, it was like, he said, or no, but after he told me what happened, he said no more motions, because that's Mojo's court now. So the common law court is a superior court of record. It's the highest court. Superior. There is no higher court in this republic than a superior court of record. Okay. It's equivalent to the Supreme Court. And when it comes to a contest between a judgment of the Supreme Court and a court of record, the court of record is binding on the Supreme Court. And there are Supreme Court cases that say that. So
very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I promise you there. Unfortunately, I didn't prepare it. I didn't think I was even I didn't know what I was going to go into, honestly. But yeah, it's as binding on all other courts as it is on the Supreme Court. And it's as binding as the Supreme Court's ruling would be on all other courts. So that's the thing about a court of record. What is a court of record? It's your court if you want it to be. It's basically the stipulations of a common law court. The two most important stipulations: a common law court has to proceed according to the course of common law, and a common law court has to have a tribunal independent of the magistrate. who is appointed to hold it.
Yeah, right.
Which means what that means. So let me break that down. The tribunal is the decision-making power, meaning the magistrate, which is all there is. There is no judge in a court of record. When you file an at-law case and you create a court of record and you make sure that you say this is a superior court of record on your case, there is no judge. And whoever's sitting in the seat of judge is now a magistrate. And that magistrate has no judicial discretion. He can't deny anything that you want. He cannot do it. He has to ask you for exactly how you want this to proceed, because he's just a clerk at that point.
I was going to say he's like an overseer kind of.
So that's where the jury comes from. That's why we have the right to jury, because the only thing higher than a plaintiff in a common law case is a jury. And you have a petite jury or a grand jury. A petite jury is 6 to 12, and a grand jury, a real grand jury, the one that could take down this filthy piracy system, is 25 people who actually know what they're doing.
That's all it would take.
Yeah. It's all it took to take Nixon out of office.
But they've made people believe that they have no power, that they're small, that they, that there's no, like they're insignificant kind of thing. But really, from what I'm understanding so far, is that we have so much power, and the power that they fear, if we ever learn and truly understand what you're talking about.
It's the Wizard of Oz, man.
That was a good way to put it. Absolutely.
It's the Wizard of Oz. It's just a little dude behind a curtain. That's it. In fact, the Wizard of Oz is a great metaphor for what's happened. Everything that you're doing to you is an illusion, because you are an infant. And I do mean that. Most of the people that are hearing this right now, and I'm not insulting you, I'm telling you the truth. At law, you're an infant. You do not know these things. You cannot defend yourself.
And that's why they want to give you lawyers and all of that. They have to.
Definition of a torn, 1828 Webster's Dictionary, is to transfer homage or service from one feudal lord to another. And that's what they've done, is brought feudalism back over here. Feudalism is usufruct. It's usufructory. So like over in England, the king is technically has absolute title to all the lands. It's not necessarily what they call it, but it is. It's like fee simple absolute or something like that. And it's basically he owns superior claim to all the lands. And then the barons would take a portion of that land under title. So the land has a title, and whoever holds that land is a baron. So it's not actually the man that has the title. It's the land that has the title. And the person using it, right, is subject to the responsibilities and obligations of that title. Right. And then he has knights. So he'll subdivide his land up into various knight fiefdoms, right? And that's where the whole term fee comes from. That's what it is. Fee. It's a fee, feudal fee. You notice how many fees you have, court fees and all that stuff. It's for the use of property that you don't have absolute claim over, because they've taken it, the birth certificate, and they mortgaged it.
And like that's what I was just thinking, like through mortgages and stuff like that. And I'm also thinking, as we talk about the king and stuff like that, it's kind of like they've transferred that's part of the illusion, right? Like, oh, well, we can't just have one ruler over top. That wouldn't be right if we can have one person that has.
So that's what
transferred it. They transferred
the
Magna Carta.
I have to clean that up for you so you get a better understanding. With it, Magna Carta, that actually put common law into writing, basically made it so that a tribunal or a grand jury is what it actually is. That's where our whole grand jury concept comes from, the Magna Carta. That's why I'm telling you, the Magna Carta is, in reality, if you want to think about it like this, the founding document of our republic with a few alterations. Instead of having a king above everyone, everyone became kings and queens.
Ah, okay.
Do you see what I'm saying? And operated under the same law. So another way of looking at it is we all became barons under common law with no king. So we don't have to look to a king to do anything, and also the 25 barons under the Magna Carta can kill the king.
Right.
They can do anything. That's what the Magna Carta did. Was it allowed them to make sure that they had their common law avenues still, right? So in the 25 barons could literally do whatever they needed to do to make sure that the common law was observed. And the common law, again, is something that's only been written recently in comparative history of mankind, because it was actually like a sin to write it down. Not a sin's not the right word, but it was a the
frowned
word
upon.
escapes me, but it was it's basically blasphemous if you want to look at it like that, but no,
Right.
it's still not the right word. It's like a sacrilege to write it down, right? So because it gave people the opportunity to lie, but then they were forced to, because the Roman law came over to England and started using all this paperwork to take everybody's property. And the paperwork's binding. And that's one thing that people are like, oh, the courts will never listen to stuff. No, they know the spiritual source of all law, and they know that they have to do it exactly right, and they have to get your consent, and they have to obey your claims and if you know what you're doing, if you do it how they did it in the first place. Think about this. Like I told you about the seal. All courts have a seal.
Mm-hmm.
The Secretary of State has a seal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Every main person part of taking control of your estate has a seal.
That's right.
And you sign these contracts with no seal. And what that means is you came under their seal. That's literally what it means. Just look up seal in a law dictionary. Look up, I go to the free dictionary, and it's got every dictionary and all the seals, all the definitions and various different, you've got Bouvier's, which is the one I trust the most. And then you've got Collins Dictionary. You've got, I don't know what the Gerald and Hill or whatever, but apparently that's another. You got West's Encyclopedia of American Law. So you got these different sources, and you find the commonalities. Then you go to the oldest source to get the true understanding of what the other ones were trying to obfuscate with words, basically, and different concepts, right? And then you're like, oh, that's why. Well, the seal is it basically makes your paperwork. Actually, exactly what it does. If it's a contract with the seal, it's not a contract anymore. It's a covenant. That's the definition of covenant. It's a contract that's signed, sealed, and delivered. And the term signed, sealed, and delivered. Yeah, people say it. They have no idea what it means.
That's exactly what it means.
That's exactly what it means.
Wow. I'm fascinated by stuff like this. I really am, Ryan. Like it's just when you start to go down the road of learning the language, the true language that they're using to enslave us, it's fascinating. Like to me, it is. Like I'm always now looking for the true meaning of words. And that started when Mark Passio put the challenge out, go ask people what a right is. And then ask people too, he said, go ask people who makes the laws. And I took that challenge. I'm like, I will do that. I'm going to go and ask people. So I went downtown in my local city, and I just started asking random strangers, and I never got the right answer. Like people don't know what a real right is, and they certainly don't understand where laws come from. That's where the moral relativism comes in. They think that it's written on a piece of paper and by a politician.
It's reciprocal and mutual blame on the part of so a wolf's always going to be a wolf, right?
That's a good point. Yeah,
right?
I get it.
So they're always, that was the point. So the only way that this republic got founded in the first place was because the colonists were all lawyers. The main staple of every household was a Blackstone's commentary and a Holy Bible, right? And the Bible's where they recorded their family deeds, basically, like marriages, deaths, births, and that's the common law way to prove your who you are, right?
Yeah, like your lineage, I guess, would be a good word.
Right, or just validation. Like, this is our family Bible. Here I am, my name right here at this time, all that stuff, right? Because there's a significant amount of people were much more honorable, right? Which is going to be another challenge of bringing common law back, or maybe only a portion of us are actually going to be able to use it and escape what's coming. I don't know. But either way, people have to become honorable again.
And their word means something, right? Like that, like back, like you were saying in the day, your word, like that's why when you hear people say, I give you my word, there's a reason that's even spoken that way.
Well, it's very hard to find information on seals because they're intentionally hiding it. And that is the power, right? But you have to be careful because that power can bite you in your ass if you don't know what you're doing, right? So the seal, I think, I'm not sure, this is just the own theory I'm formulating. I think that is the ultimate form of your word, or the word of your house. It's like you're putting everything that is the essence of anything you care about on what you're saying, and that's why it cannot be questioned. That's what I think, and that's what I have gleaned from various treaties and old law dictionaries, and that's why it's so important. But one thing is for sure, it is working, and it is important, and it's the first thing you should do before you file all your other documents, so that you can seal your other documents, which make them unquestionable. That's why they seal documents. It's for authenticity. It's unquestionable.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And they still do that. Yeah, they still got seals. Absolutely.
No, 100%. Even corporations have seals. They're corporate seals. And it's funny, corporate seals have to actually come under the state in which they're incorporated. The state in which they're incorporated, well, this is before everything became feudal, under the feudal corporation known as the United States, located in the District of Columbia. But beforehand, their seals have to say what state they're under. So their seals are actually coming under a greater seal by doing that. Right? Because the state has a seal.
Yeah.
In each house,
that's why they buried this information, especially about seals, because of the power behind them. They don't want people knowing this.
Exactly. Now, it's not just in the seal. It has to be in your knowledge as well, and understanding what you're doing. Right? Now, people have a problem with the word understand. You're understanding the law. You're not understanding their law. There is only one law, which brings me back to my original point, the 5 jurisdictions of American jurisprudence. Okay? And you have to know why and how each of these jurisdictions come into being. And you can, once you know this and understand it, then you can properly challenge jurisdiction. Well, Your Honor, if you do not know the 5 jurisdictions of American jurisprudence, I have trouble understanding how you're even in your position. Right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Because they are as follows. The main 2 in our original republic is common law, which is known as law, simply law. When you see in the Constitution, anytime the word law is written, it's common law. And it's the common law of England with one exception, meaning it's the Magna Carta without a king.
Makes sense. I get it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Which I think they did intentionally. I think that this was a double-edged sword, because I think the barons all got together and wanted to be mutual kings and rule over the peasants without just one ultimate king. So I think that the Magna Carta opened the door for this corporate oligarchy that we have right now. Right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Oligarchy. But it also opened the door for us to have a way out of it as well. They just counted on us being too stupid to understand what they're doing. Right? Yeah. So you have common law, and you have equity. Those are the 2 listed in Article 3, Section 2, right? And then the rest of the courts, with the exception of probate, will come under Article 1, Section 8, right? So these are powers of Congress to erect these various types of courts. And so the other courts are, so you have common law and equity. Now, common law is do no harm. Okay. Correct. And it has its whole forms of action, its own language. Yeah, that's what jurisdiction, the word jurisdiction means law words. Juris means law, and diction, like dictionary, means words. So the words you're using determines the law that you are under. When you want to talk about word magic, it determines your jurisdiction. That's what the word jurisdiction actually means. Juris, law, diction, words. So it has this like replevin, abatement, trespass. There is no trespassing. That's why you see signs with trespassing, or in common law, they can say trespassing because they made it up and it's a commercial term now. It's statutory construction. It's just trespass. That's it.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Right. Demur. Right. So these are all different types of common law terms that each have their own concept and definition. Right. Replevin is taking of someone's property. Right. Trespass is obviously violating someone's property.
Right. Yes.
Which can be your estate as well, your rights. They can trespass upon your rights, which is called trespass upon the case, or trespass on the case, right? And, that's generally a common weapon you can use in your court of record.
They're definitely trespassing on people's rights. Like
exactly. It's called trespass on the case. When it's something that's incorporeal, it's called trespass on the case.
On the case. Okay. I'm writing stuff
Right.
down here.
So that's all the common law, or not all of them, but that's some examples of common law actions. And then in equity, so you have a declaration at law is how you make your claim, which anytime you say at law, this is when you go file your case number, right? You file with the clerk. They're going to automatically try to file it in equity for a reason I'm going to explain in a second.
Okay.
But you make sure it's at law, because at law only ever means common law. That's it. Nothing else.
All right.
There is only one at law. It's common law. Now, when you get to equity, you're in equity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you file a bill in equity instead of a declaration. Now, what equity is the enforcement of contracts. That's all it is.
Okay.
It's what is fair based upon what was agreed to. And this allows them latitude in their judicial interpretation, because now you're going to a chance. It's called, you pray to a chancellor, because chancery and equity, they're basically synonymous in this country, but they're a little different, because the way the courts of chancery were started was, I believe it was King Edward, I want to say, but I could be wrong. And forgive me, but you guys can go look this up, because the substance of what I'm saying is how it started. And basically the priests came to the king and said, hey, we know you're really busy. So the king first started something where he would allow people to come to him for the king's justice and pay a fee, and have the king decide upon a case instead of going to the court.
Yep.
Well, that evolved into the priests coming to the king and saying, hey, we know you're busy. Why don't we create this new court of chancery? And you allow us to, they literally said this, I'm not kidding you. They said, let us hold your conscience. We'll hold your conscience, which is impossible. But
that's what I'm thinking right now. But
right. Basically, it's not impossible if you think about law in spiritual terms, which it is, because the priest does hold the king's conscience if he's, subject to that path, which most kings were during this time. And so we'll hold your conscience, and we will act. We'll have a chancellor, right? And the chancellor holds the king's conscience, and then the chancellor delegates various cases to his courts of chancery and the people that are under him to decide upon them. And basically, it's the interpretation of contract. Well, when that came to it's not common law, but the founders recognized a need for, and that's why all state constitutions and the federal constitution said there'd be no law passed ex post facto impairing the obligations or performance of contracts, or however it's put. I butchered that a little bit, but it's basically you can't interfere with contracts, which is how they actually get around the Constitution to do everything they're doing administering our estates, because it's all based on contracts. So they're operating constitutionally, but they're operating outside of the Constitution under the 14th Amendment. So the 14th Amendment is what I like to call this black hole of contract, where you literally fall out of your sovereign capacity into the realm of congressional legislation, and because they're administering your state. So now you're under private law, right? That's why they actually call it public policy. It used to be public law. Public law was for the benefit of private use, but now it's public policy, which is private law for public use. And there's a difference between policy and law. Yeah, there's a difference between policy and law, right? So policy governs basically contracts, corporations, stuff like that. Law it has to be based on the common law. Now, when they write it in statutory construction, it's still written by men, and its interpretation is, or its application is to that current situation and condition of that society. So it's going to be, but it's got to be based on common law, like say like Replevin basically. And it's like, okay, so it's a community of farm. Well, you wouldn't have to alter that, but you get what I'm saying.
Right.
Like if you have to define the law that already exists more specifically to apply to this certain community, that's all the statute's supposed to actually be in this country. And it's supposed to be you're supposed to be able to take this common law principle and then take that statute and be like, oh, I see how they say that. That makes sense, which obviously is definitely not the case anymore. And it's not even public law. It's public policy, because now you're just under pure contract law. It's what we use as currency, is contracts.
This is great. This is great. Yeah. But so if it's all contract, how are they getting away? Like, people sign contracts like, every day. And if you don't even, how do I word this? you're signing contracts, but if you don't understand what you're speaking about and what contracts truly are, how is that even legal? Like, are they lying? It's deception at best, at minimum, is
Well,
what
no,
they're
so
doing.
you have to understand. So they mislead you, yes, of course. But see, again, this goes all back to presumptions. And if you're not an infant, someone is not going to be able to mislead you. That's why they destroyed the family first, because this knowledge was taught from generation to
Oh,
generation,
I see. Okay, I got it.
right? So if you're an infant, then if you don't know that I'm screwing you over, then that's your fault. That's how they look at it.
So
Do
they
I
just look at it
personally?
as if you don't know, that's no excuse. The information's out
Right,
there. You just choose
right.
not to invest
Yep.
and learn it. Okay, I get it now.
And
Okay.
objectively, that's true.
I was going to say that is true. I can't argue
Yeah.
that.
No, that's what I'm saying. You can't actually, so there really is no way to say that what you're doing is fraud until you make your claim upon your estate and establish yourself. And then if they trespass, now they're violating law.
No, they're violating. That makes sense. The way you just
That's
broke
why
that
it
down.
shakes them. That's why it shakes them. That's why they're super afraid of it.
Right, right. That makes perfect sense. It kind of just all came together right there.
So that's equity, is the enforcement of contracts. Then you have military, obviously, which is its own jurisdiction of court martial and stuff like that. And then you get into that law by contract, and it's presumed that you know what you're getting into, because you're like, I'm going to go join the military, and you sign a contract and you know what it is. Like, now you're government property, and that's, so military law. Then you have admiralty. Now, admiralty is different than military. Sometimes they come together when you're dealing with the Navy and stuff like that. But admiralty is the law of vessels and ships.
I hear a lot about this. This is where I kind of dipped my toes in. Was I heard somebody speaking about admiralty law and how the courts are named, like the parts of the courts are named after this, and giving birth and all of these things. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's where I kind of dipped my toes in years ago. Was when
Now,
I first
wow,
heard of admiralty, and the flag in the courtroom has got a gold fringe on it and stuff.
it's an admiralty. Yes,
Right.
it's an
Okay.
admiralty
So
flag.
sorry.
They'll never admit it, but it is. And
Okay.
they've carefully covered up all the history regarding it in the law of flags of this country. But
Okay.
it's actually pretty much impossible to find. But it's a mutilation of the flag.
Okay.
So
Perfect. Admiralty
by
law.
law, it signifies an alteration and a change of jurisdiction, because all a flag does is denote the jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing with admiralty, and everybody, even at one point throughout my journey, I focused on that. And here's the thing: it is true, and you can see it, and you can make the connections, but they're so abstract, and they'll never admit that's what they're doing. But they used admiralty. Well, they used military jurisdiction after the Civil War. They put us under the Lieber Code. Now, that martial law and that territorial occupation of a foreign corporation. Now, people have to understand that the District of Columbia has something called boundary stones around it.
I've heard
It's
this.
like
Right.
it's like a
Yeah.
cage. And
Mm-hmm.
it, on one side, it says this is the jurisdiction of Maryland or Virginia, depending on which side of the boundary you're on. And then on the other side says United States jurisdiction. And that was literally where we caged in this foreign, because it has always, since the states got together and created it and registered. Yeah, they registered it in England, right? You can look, it's on the company's house.gov.uk. It's and I've shown it many times on my show. It was created. It was notified July 3rd. Well, they actually changed that. I don't know how they changed that to July 2nd, but they
Right.
did change it. And I have it on older shows where it was July 3rd. And even the day I found that out, somebody was on my show and they were like, "Yeah, I was on here." I think it was my dad, and he was like, "Yeah, they did change that." I'm like, "Yeah, it's fucking weird," but
That is
there I did
weird.
it again.
Yeah.
Sorry, but anyways, it's an English company, and it's always been a foreign corporation. It's basically just a utility. It's a government services corporation. It's supposed to be our vehicle to deal in international maritime law with other nations and trade and treaty and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That was how it was sold to the nation. But it's foreign, it's its own entity, and it's its own sovereign city state. And that's why it never dealt with the people. Right. So the Civil War was basically that corporation tricking some of the other Confederate states to turn against the Southern Confederate states, because they're all Confederate. It says Penhallow versus Stone's administrators. When a union is corporate, not Confederate, the sovereignty resides within the states. And sovereignty can only be asserted upon a clear title, which goes back to what I was saying about how we have no money. Because you have to actually, if you're using contracts and indebtedness to pay for things, then you're indentured. It's just the very nature of what you're doing. So once they territorially occupied it, right, now it's technically maritime admiralty law, because that's where it kind of blends together. Military is its own jurisdiction in dealing with the military, but it is almost like a sublet of maritime, because even the word maritime, Mars, god of war, maritime,
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Denotes, and commerce also is kind of a form of war, if you really want to get into it. It automatically comes under that. So that's how they kind of brought it in onto the land, and then they just progressed it from there, and by taking over everybody's estates and all the things that I've been talking about. So that again is a rabbit hole where we would spend 2 hours on by itself, just the Civil War and what happened there. But so that's maritime, basically deals with the law of vessels and commodity commerce, right? Which is, so lex mercatoria is the common law of admiralty, if you really want to look at it like that. But it's not common law, but it's the common law of merchants. So it's the customs and traditions that have been practiced for millennia amongst seafaring merchants, and it's called lex mercatoria, or the law merchant. And that's what Colonel Edward Mendel House actually was quoted as saying, or allegedly, because I don't know if anybody's actually true, but what he says is exactly what's happening. He says that we'll basically use the law merchant to enslave them and hold the security interest above them forever, and that's what they're doing. Bring the law merchant. So maritime admiralty is basically international shipping law type stuff, right? And so then you have, so what is it? Common law, equity, military, maritime admiralty. And then you have probate. Now, probate is actually considered ecclesiastical, even though lawyers will try to say there's no ecclesiastical court in the United States. But yes, it is, because it started by William the Conqueror creating that spiritual court, dealing with disposing of the property of deceased people, right? So, and thereby being able to screw their heirs out of property by, claiming they're incompetent infant, or just merely skimming off of it while they're administering it until the heir comes of age. This is what was going on. And that probate court is exactly that. So if you die with a will, right? If you die with a will, again, you appoint an executor to carry out your will, and there is no need for probate. But if you die intestate, well, now they try to run everything through probate anyway, because you're an infant, and everything is being run through probate because it's the administration of your estates. But if you die without a will, again, it escheats to the state. And if you have heirs or various property, like living property that needs maintenance as part of that estate, it is the probate court that handles that. Well, that's what they did with us. So when you agree to be a 14th Amendment citizen, you immediately become indentured. And it says it right in the 14th Amendment. It says all persons, which are not people, born in the United States, meaning the District of Columbia, or subject. And that word subject literally means subject, like a sovereign subject, a subject belonging to a superior sovereign. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state in which they reside. Now, there's another term, resident. Resident 100%, and I can prove it with a treaty of law from the 1939, I think it was, where it says that resident is short for resident alien and is distinguished from a state citizen as being someone who owes their allegiance to a foreign nation and is in your state doing business on behalf of that foreign nation, and they get resident status.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Wow, so I didn't know the resident one. This is really wow.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see if I can find that. If you want to talk for a second, I'll pull it up. Pull it up out of that treaty so people know I'm not just pulling shit out of my butt. You know what I mean?
Well, no, it's just blowing my mind. Like, this seems to me like it's like a land grab. That's what I keep thinking about when we keep talking about all this estate stuff. Now it's like we're infants, and they count on us not knowing what we're speaking about. They that's what they fear, is people learning this and then implementing it. And I think I know that's what they fear the most, especially like you said, knowledge. Like, this is what it's all about, and it's out there. We just have to be willing to go and search it out and put it into practice. But it's like a land grab to me. That's what I just keep thinking about. Like, it's just like,
No, that's exactly right.
it's just crazy. And then you get into these contracts, and how many people get roped into these contracts, not really understanding what they're getting themselves involved in. And what really pisses me off, to be honest, and is that it starts with your birth certificate, because like you said, you're born free, and then immediately they're throwing the
Pledge.
shit. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're pledged, you're shackled. And I mean, can I blame my parents? They didn't know, but I guess I can blame them, because they should have known.
But should they have? See, here's the thing:
I
is
would
that,
think
like,
so, right? I
there's
mean,
also a spiritual aspect to this. This was allowed to happen. There was something that happened and I don't want to get too much into it, but
no, this is
let's
fascinating.
just put it this way: is like the frequency of the consciousness of collective mankind is rising at an unprecedented rate.
Yep.
And not only that, but what has assisted that is the development of our access to information. Like, the amount of research that I've been able to do, and I'm only 34, about to be 35, and the amount of research I've been able to do would have taken lifetimes without the very technology that they're trying to use to enslave us.
Yep.
They're trying to use this technology that is the key to what they want, is simultaneously the key to taking them down.
I say that all the time. Agreed. Yep.
Yeah, and it must necessarily be that when you understand, esotericism, it has to be both simultaneously, and then your will, or the collective will, determines which direction it's expressed, which end of the spectrum it goes to.
Yep. 100%.
And so here it is. I did find it. It's elementary. It's called. It's part of the Hornbook series, which Hornbook is a great series, especially when it comes to common law, and they cover other forms of law too. Oh yeah, I guess I should finish for your viewers though. So we have probate, which is ecclesiastical, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the fifth form of law. And the way that you end up in probate again is by, say you're the child of someone, or you're the son or daughter is a better term to use, because child again is an infant. But the son or daughter of someone who is so irresponsible, because that's literally how it's looked at in amongst people who are sovereign, know what they're doing. To not leave a will is, you are an idiot. Like, that is irresponsible. That's actually detrimental. It's against the law in some states to not leave a will and make provisions for your wife and children. Like, you basically just, if you didn't make a will, you just let your family be taken by the wolf. Like, you just put your family to the wolves.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So
that makes sense. Yep.
And they think about, and that's how they look at it, and that's why they feel justified in being the wolves. It was like, oh, well, you apparently wanted us to eat your family and property. That's how they look at it, because you didn't leave a will.
That's right. I try to tell people that they look at things different. Like, the people that have this knowledge, and they see, they operate on a different, I don't want to say level, but they understand things, and they look at things differently than than the normal everyday person would. And you sum that up perfectly with the will. And like, it's like it's almost like if they look at this like, well, if you're so ignorant, you don't even realize what's going on. Well, that's on you, kind of thing.
Exactly. No, and they do look at different, because they have an understanding not only of society, but of creation. And the laws of creation and how it works. That's all law is based on. That's why common law is the default law, is because it's founded upon the law of nature, law of creation. And they know this stuff deeply. They understand it. Mm-hmm. Maybe not these younger generations, and I'm definitely not talking about the politicians. Some of them might on stage. Trump does, in my opinion. He definitely knows this stuff. But like, I'm talking about the ruling families, that like the people that make the Rothschilds look like a beggar, right? Yep. And
they understand this well.
The old Venetian nobility that were basically given the world in trust by the Pope as trustees through the Unum Sanctum, and that's how that worked out. And so, and that's what we're still in today. So, but let me see here. So the whole thing about that is so when you're mortgaged, well, first of all, they use the Set Decay Act of 1666 to create a presumption of death, right? So that's what they implemented when they did the Emergency Banking Relief Act and all that stuff. And they took their United States citizens, the ones that agreed to be United States citizens, and they hypothecated. Do you know what hypothecate means? It means to take and use as collateral. They hypothecated the property of those infants under there, because that's what a United States citizen is. When you agree to be a United States citizen, you're now agreeing to come under the protection of government instead of your own protection under God. And you get privileges granted to you by the government instead of unalienable rights endowed upon you by God. Makes sense. Any privileges granted to you, and I can prove this is such a rudimentary 101 fact that I can prove 7 ways from Sunday, that you got McDonald v. State from the Supreme Court of Indiana. That's the guy was tried and convicted of murder, and he appealed it, saying that one of the jurors was a foreigner because he wasn't a United States citizen. And the appeal got overturned or denied because the guy was not a United States citizen. He came over and naturalized directly into Indiana and filed his state citizenship naturalization papers, and didn't bother filing with the federal bullshit that they were trying to do, because it doesn't matter. The state's what's important. I'm not going to join this federal feudal corporation. Right? And they said no. He says, while he may not be a United States citizen, he is an Indiana state citizen, and one may be a citizen of a state and not a citizen of the United States. And they denied his appeal based on its McDonald v. State, Indiana Supreme Court. I've shown it on my show many times. And that's just one example. There's many examples. Yeah. Black's Law Dictionary, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, they all say, if you look up 14th Amendment, it says created or recognized for the first time the concept of a federal citizenship as opposed to a state citizenship. I think it's a little different than what I just said, but that's the basic. It says it created or recognized for the first time a federal citizenship. Right. So this federal citizenship is an indenture. So in 33, they hypothecated and mortgaged and that's why they did it. They wanted to create their own class of citizenship because, see, the federal government could centralize the borrowing power. Now you don't have to go to each one of the states and okay it. Right. So that's why they were given control over commerce. The problem was they didn't have any collateral because they only had the citizens within their capital, and they only had the citizenry in the federal territories that were not states, like Puerto Rico, Guam, whatever, right? And that's not enough to sustain a leviathan of a central bank, a monstrous, greedy meat grinder that is a central bank, right? Which is why they did. That's why they did the London fires and all that stuff, and then they did the Set Decay Act of 1666 and said, "Hey, we're going to just presume everybody's dead at sea, and you have to come forth with an action at law in our court of wards to prove that you're alive, then we'll give you your estate back. But if not, it is sheets to the crown." And then they used all the property that is sheeted to the crown, in the ignorance of the people who didn't come claim their property. They used that to start the Bank of England, which ultimately
I was going to say that. I was going to ask that. Did they start the bank? I was going to ask you that too. See, I got a little bit of knowledge that's coming, but this is crazy.
Yeah. Like they did the same thing. Yeah.
What? Oh my God.
Yeah, but now see, they couldn't just go to the king and do something like that here. So what they had to do is centralize the borrowing power. But the problem with the centralized borrowing power is it didn't have any collateral. That's why they created the 14th Amendment, to expand their net of collateral.
It makes sense.
And this was all with the intention of establishing what they did establish, the Federal Reserve, 1913. Mm-hmm. Once they had enough United States citizenship collateral. And see, this is where marriage licenses and everything come. See, when the slaves were newly freed, and I hope people understand this is merely an academic discourse, and I'm not agreeing with what they did, but I am going to explain to you why they did it. When they freed, they didn't free the slaves. They basically stole the title to the slaves and made them, instead of being public or private slaves, they became public slaves. And they did that so they could expand that net and get everybody under that umbrella, ultimately with the idea of having this administrative system we have today. And remember, administrative is probate. It's a trust. It's
That's right.
intestate
Yes.
trust, right? So I want, every time I say administrative, I want you guys to understand that's what I'm saying. It's somebody's taking your will and they're controlling your property because you've never expressed it. But anyway, so the marriage license started with that subject, or with when they took title over the slaves, essentially, right? So they took title over the slaves. And they said, hey, you're now a United States citizen and we'll protect your rights, right? Or we're going to grant you these rights and then we're going to protect them. We're going to give you these. And really what they are is privileges. And this is where you get the idea of civil rights. It actually started with the Civil Rights Act of 1866, but that was too impermanent and they said it could be changed by Congress. So they wanted to actually make a constitutional amendment. A side note about that, it was never lawfully ratified. And June 13th, 1967, House Congressional Record, page, I want to say 1054, I'm pretty sure, and onward, says 14th Amendment, equal protection law or tool of usurpation. And then the congressmen go through and explain exactly how it was never lawfully ratified. They excluded the southern states from the ratification process because they disagreed with it. And then they even excluded 2 northern states, New Jersey and Maryland. It's New Jersey for sure, and one other one. They excluded them because they didn't agree with it. And still, even after all that, they didn't meet the 3/4 majority vote to ratify it, and they just declared it ratified anyway. Okay, so it was never even lawfully ratified, and that's a fact. That's on congressional record. So this whole thing is a sham anyways. And it's because you have no will. It's because the people have no will. And they're like, shit, we don't care. They don't have any will. We're just going to do whatever we want. So here's the thing, right? So, yeah, it's deep. So
I know. I'm just like, my head's spinning. It really is. I'm just like, this is so much bigger than I even imagined. Like, it's just, go on.
Yeah, it goes way back into history to the origins of why we're even here. That's why, yeah, it's exactly.
But the way you're breaking it down, I hope I hope people are truly listening. And you have to go back for a second or third listen. I know I'm going to have to. This is starting to make sense of why we're enslaved the way we are. This is what they're using against us.
Yeah, 100%. It all goes back to your will, right? Mm-hmm. Your free will. Or is it free, right? It's not if you don't claim it and use it. Somebody else is going to use your will. So there's a quote that I like. It says that if you do not know what you are, the state is going to tell you what you are.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? Or rather, who you are, what you are, who you are. I think the quote is actually who you are. If you do not know who you are, then the state is going to tell you. And that's what's happening.
Yeah,
so,
that's what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just laughing because I was like, it's so true. Like, that's what they're doing. They're telling people what they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And people don't know anything. They're like, oh, that's what I am, I guess, because the God government. Now, you think back to the 1960s when they were doing all this subliminal messaging. You remember when they had the sign-offs and all that?
Yeah.
And you've seen the subliminal where it says, trust your government, God. That illustrates the point of what I'm saying. They're trying to become God. There is only one lawmaker, and they want people to forget about God and just believe in government. And then by contract, because you believe government, so you're going to agree to whatever they say, now by contract, they usurp God's authority, which they're forgetting one thing, can never do that. But it doesn't stop them from trying.
Yeah, they're trying. Yeah, they're bending rules. But I mean, yeah, I get what you're saying. I talk about this all the time. And people have a hard time with that. Like, they really do. And I'm like, but you got right to the crux, like right to the point of it, is that they want to be God. That's what this.
It's all it is. Yeah. I had a conversation with the lawyer one time, and I was explaining like law. There is only one. He says, you better not bring up God in the courtroom. And he said, because those judges, and I said, yeah, they're Satanists. And he goes, yeah, I mean, yeah. And he literally, he caught himself, but he said, yeah, no, they're not that. It's just, or something, and tried to cover up what he said. Like, no, dude, I know they're fucking devil worshippers. That's what they are. Yeah. So, but what I was explaining, the marriage license. So when a white person wanted to, or when a white man or woman wanted to marry a black man or woman, because those people were property, you had to get a license to do it because it was considered animal husbandry. And not because of their color, their race, or anything like that. Actually, it was because of their political status of being property. They're cattle, or actually more specifically, chattel.
Slavery. I've done shows on this.
They're movable property. So they're like, okay, so you want to get with this property, then you need permission because that's unlawful. And that's what a license is permission to do something unlawful. So then they created the marriage license and eventually extended it to everybody. And I want your viewers to know that's just a historical fact. That's not any kind of indication of my personal feelings towards anything. But lawfully, the way that they explained it, like I said, it has nothing to do with the color of their skin or anything. It's your political status.
Right.
Because let us not forget that there were actually black slave owners as well. So,
That's so true.
But not to get too much into that. So now they've got you as this 14th Amendment infant. And then, of course, they're administering your estate at that point. See, he who accepts the benefit forgoes the inheritance, or rather, he who accepts the benefit has a duty, which is a debt. So when you take something, nothing's ever free. That's what welfare is. That's why they did it. Because if you're taking something from them for what you perceive as free, actually at law, you are an infant who cannot take care of yourself or manage your estate. And therefore, what they get in trade is control of your estate.
That makes a lot of sense. And see, once again, Ryan, it's what you always hear these sayings that keep coming up. And this is another one I tell people, like when they say nothing is free, there's a reason that is worded that way. Like it just, you know what I mean? And it makes sense to me. Like nothing is free. There's a price to be paid. And that was amazing. Like the way you broke it down there. That's so true.
It's
so true.
Yeah, it's the free lunch principle. That's what it is. So members of the state. Okay, so here, I pulled it up. Actually, if you want to expound on that for a second, I'll be right back.
Okay, not a problem. Yeah, no, awesome. Like this, I'm really learning a lot here. I'm writing down like crazy because this is stuff I got to start learning myself. As I was telling all you guys, I'm learning, and I've heard a lot of this stuff, but it's a lot, as you guys are understanding. I'm sure especially if you've never heard any of this, but I've been dipping my toes in for a while now and curious and watching videos and watching Ryan's show, and I'm trying to learn this. It's just a lot. Like you're not going to do this in a weekend. This is years of, and they make it that way. I absolutely have always known that they make stuff confusing on purpose because they don't want you understanding what I always say, their language that they're using against us. And that's the way I just word it to myself. Like they don't want us having this knowledge. And Ryan nailed it too when he said that we've never had, I was just saying this recently, we've never had the ability to have so much information at our fingertips in history. It's all there. And you just have to be willing to go seek out that information. And this is information that was occulted and would be passed down, through secret societies and stuff. It would take a lifetime to just learn what Ryan is talking about right now. This would be something I can't even imagine how hard it was to get this knowledge. It would have to be passed down through secret societies and family members. And yeah, it's so much.
Well, even with its ease of use, Rick, I have to tell you, I still spend sometimes it annoys my wife, my family in general.
Right.
My entire 10-hour work night is going through discourses on the Magna Carta or the law by Frederick Bastiat, or, you know what I mean? Just various, just learning what these people, what is the foundation of the stuff. So, and it's nonstop. You can never, it's a lifetime of learning. As much as I know right now, I still know nothing compared to the entire body of what there is to know. Do you know what I mean? But I know enough to be a huge, huge problem for them. So,
but that's the problem too, Ryan, is like, no, how many people in society are even willing to dip their toe into what you're talking about? Most people, let's be honest, most people could give a shit. They really couldn't have, and that's just being honest. Most people are not concerned.
That's why the people doing this do not feel guilty about what they're doing. They're justified.
Exactly.
Moral relative, because the people want to be slaves. They want to be infants.
They want to be led. And that's what I say. Like they look at it as all the information's out there. Like if they choose to remain in ignorance and not grow, I guess, or learn this information, they deserve what they get. I think that's exactly what they think. Like you said, they're like, well, they deserve it.
Well, two things to add to that is one, as far as the way that I am, we can never take credit for this spirit of truth that's been put in us. And we all have, every one of us that seeks the truth has to understand that was put in us. And so what we get, we have a duty to give, and we never can take credit for our ability to know it. if that
Great
makes
point.
sense.
That makes
Like,
total sense.
yeah, and that's the conclusion I come from. So I come to it from a place, and I teach people from a place of humility. Unless you're being a jerk on my show and just being disruptive, then I'm going to be, But there is humility. I can't take credit for this. I didn't make me. I didn't make my brain, and I didn't put the spirit of truth in me. You know what I mean? So that's
right.
only God. All praise to God. But outside of that, the second thing I want to say about it is that. The beautiful thing about a constitutional republic and why we are not and never were a democracy, and this whole democracy is just administrative. That's all. It only became a democracy because they're administering your estate. But once you take your estate, you know the law. See, the difference between a constitutional republic and a democracy is in a constitutional republic, one man and the law, or woman, and the law is a majority. There's nothing the masses can do to come against you. You're not subject to the will of a majority. There is only one law. And you have your own court to take anybody out who tries to mess with you. Civilized warfare. And then we have the Second Amendment in case the court doesn't work out.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but generally the court does work out because they have to obey. They have to do this right to not incur the wrath of karma, if you will. And that's why people always talk about the predictive program. That is a thing. They do predictively program. They show you what they're going to do in the news and in the movies and stuff. You know why? Because again, as you have said many times on this interview tonight, it's all contract. And so what they're doing is that's basically your silence is consent. It's all. You got to remember that the law is based on presumptions of the current situation, basically, and also, it's basically based on presumptions as well of like, if I put out a writ against you, declaration against you, and you don't answer it, I'm going to presume that you agree with me. Right. And that's how the law looks at it. And then I'm going to default you. And then because you didn't respond, I'm going to, okay, so you agree. Now this is a judgment in my court. And then I'm going to take that to arbitration. Or, because the judges don't really, I'm going to take it to arbitration. I'm going to take your whole house and everything that you have.
That's right. Yeah.
That's how it works.
That's how it works. You're right. And I had something great to add, but it slipped. But I was going to say, it slipped. I had something I was going to add on to it, but it might come back to me. So go ahead.
I hope it does. Elementary law. This is, I think it's 1939. I just kind of came to the picture, but I did put it
okay.
Down there.
There we go.
Okay, so this is a book called Elementary Law, Smith, right? Here, we can go back up. What is this, page 12? We'll go back up to the title so people, and you can find this on archive.org. I actually got this from another researcher, but I'm pretty sure he got it from archive.org. And what it is, it's a handbook of elementary law. And if you look at the actual, it says Smith on Elementary Law. That's the name of it.
Okay.
And it's a handbook of elementary law. And it takes a long time to write these books. And these books go through a lot of scrutiny and revision, right? So right here, you can see it was first published in 1896. Then, surprisingly, they republished it after the bankruptcy. Well, we've been bankrupt several times, but the United States, not us. The United States Corporation has been bankrupted several times, but anyways, and so you guys look this up. We go down to page 12. And page 12 says law, state, and government, right? Now, we're not going to go through all of it, but we'll go through members of a state. And it's a good book because it breaks down. Now, whenever you read treaties, you always have to remember that a bar pirate is generally writing it. So they're going to try to gloss over who you are in your sovereign capacity. And they're not going to tell you what I'm telling you tonight, but what I'm telling you is exactly how it works. And that's that's how common law works. Understood. And so if you listen to and understand what I'm saying, and then you read these books, you can actually see where they're trying to just gloss over one important factor or another that involves your power and authority as one of the political subdivisions by which the state even derives its authority. Remember that, and I want everybody to understand this. The government only has authority because you have given a portion of your sovereignty to it. That's it. and it doesn't have authority over you at all. It only acts on your behalf. And anytime if the government's ever coming after you, it better be to mediate a contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or there is no other. No, there is no other. It can never come after you, because it has to be, if the government's coming after you, yeah, here's how to put it. It better be at the behest of another one of the people who have filed a claim against you. And now you're not cooperating, and now the government's going to come after you to make you answer this claim. That's what they're there for. They're our utility. This is how it works. It's how it has worked. It's how it's always worked. And you can read these old law books, like the really old ones from the early 1800s, and you see that's exactly how it works. But they set at work. I want people to keep in mind that right after this country was founded, we were founded under the Articles of Confederation, which created the states, and a loose association called the United States and Congress assembled. And they immediately set at work trying to undermine the popular sovereignty and delegate it to just the rich. And that's why they did the Constitution. And the Constitution was drafted behind closed doors without the consent or knowledge of the public. And they actually hid the discussions, the transcripts of what was discussed at the Constitutional Convention for 60 years.
60 years, holy
before
shit.
They even released it. So they immediately started trying to undo what they did. But see, once you learn the law under which we were founded, which is common law, like I said at the beginning of this interview, the government didn't create the law. The law we chose created the government, which was us. We chose the law where we are the sovereign.
And right, and it's 60 years before it comes to light. That's something that pisses me off, is that all these deals that they do with each other is behind closed doors, late at night, when there's nobody has any say in it. I think of that with Jekyll Island and the Federal Reserve and stuff, and they just craft this shit they do behind closed doors. You know what I mean? It gets you angry when you start learning about this.
Here's the thing: closed doors are necessary. There's some knowledge that not everybody's ready for. But here's when it comes to this, well, I guess this is the best way to put it. You need to come to the knowledge.
Agreed, 100%.
And so what they did was they created, the way that I interpret the creation of our republics is that they basically gave us a fair starting point. Right, the wealthy barons. They said, listen, you're entirely free if you use this system of law and you learn it, and you know this is what we're founding everything on, and it's always going to be here, and all you have to do is learn it in order to stop what we're going to do to you. Game on.
Game on.
I have every inclination that's exactly what happened. And here I'm teaching people. I'm saying, here's the law. They can never get rid of this. This is the default law. The only way you end up in another jurisdiction is by contract. This is law. This is the law. Anytime you see the word law written in the Constitution or in any of those early documents, there is only one law. It's common law. And then all of the other jurisdictions that I was explaining, what are the other 4 jurisdictions? They all require contract for you to be pulled into them, and they're all the law of private conscience, which means somebody or some group of people are making those laws, and you are agreeing to come under them by entering those jurisdictions, which is why they always try to pull everything in equity, because equity is just the general enforcement of a contract. So they created a perpetual contract under the trust indenture by mortgaging your estates, and now they always pull you into equity, which is being done under probate, because the part of the contract is they are administering your estate under the 14th Amendment.
Right. That makes sense. Oh, and
so
I figured
that's how you, huh?
I said, go ahead.
That's how you get where jurisdictions come together. Like equity is the enforcement of, is being requested on behalf of probate, who's administering the estate. And so the probate ended up in probate as a matter of contract. And now that's being sent to equity, which is all these little traffic courts and all that stuff.
That's right.
To enforce the agreement, the trust indenture, because that's what equity is. But what they're leaving out is common law. And all we have to do is make our house, our seal, claim our estates, and use this beautiful, magical, godly gift that we have here. So let me point this out, because I know we're getting on close to 3 hours now. And
Yeah, I won't
Probably.
keep you much longer than 3. We're already going an hour over it, so thank you for taking
No,
even
it's no
more
problem,
time.
man. I would be doing my own podcast tonight anyway, so it's not a big deal. So,
Well, let me just ask one thing right before just put a pin because I wanted to ask you. I figured I was going to ask you. When I watch some of these court cases, I hear a lot of the people talking. They say, "Show me the victim." What do they what do they mean by that? I always wonder because I generally I think I get the gist of what they mean, but I know it goes
so
deeper than that.
that means that you're not understanding what I mean about common law, and that's
Right.
fine. And this has really been taken out of common understanding on purpose in a culted way. And
Right.
so, for you to be brought to a common law suit, you have to have actually hurt somebody. Like,
Right.
not just physically, but actually cause them harm, financially, trespass, whatever it is. You have to have another sovereign as the only person who can bring you into a common law court.
That's what I
Now,
thought.
yeah, another sovereign is the only person who can bring you into a common law court. And the magistrate, remember, because in a court of record, there is no judge, the magistrate can't save you from that sovereign. That's why you have the right to request a jury trial. Now, that's a collection of 12 other sovereigns that can overrule the one sovereign if he's trying to enforce a stupid law
I get
that
it.
he made
Okay,
up
I see it.
on
I
his
see
own
it.
property,
Right, because I
right?
saw one of the cases
Because
where the
you
guy
get to
said that.
you
Yeah.
get to determine the law of your property. But if your law is stupid, that's what the jury is there for.
That makes a lot. And I just watched a case today, this afternoon, because I wanted to kind of keep it fresh in my mind. And the guy said that too when he asked for a jury. He said, "I want a jury of fellow sovereigns. I don't want a jury of the
Well,
people."
so let's bring that up. All he had to do was say a jury of peers. The court knows what a peer is not an equal. It is an equal only if you're sovereign. What peer means is a fellow sovereign. I'll give you
Okay.
an example. An
Okay.
11-year-old girl found out that almost every single president was related to one another and also to ancient European royalty, which makes sense. It's all the barons. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I was saying,
Yep.
right? So, do you know the site that she found that information on was called Burke's Peerage? Peerage is nobility, it's sovereignty. So we have the right to a trial by jury of our peers because we are sovereign. We are a peer. We're part of the peerage.
Right.
We won that in the war. Peer means sovereign. So if you want a jury of your peers and somebody comes in, you can just ask them one simple question, right? When you're picking your jury, you're selecting your jury. You say, "Hey, are you a United States citizen?" Yes. Dismissed.
Next.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not a peer. You're not a peer. You're federal personnel is what you are, because what they give you is deferred retirement benefits. Again, if you accept a benefit, you have a duty, and you are now under basically a fiefdom of this feudal corporation. That's what federal means. And you're not sovereign anymore.
Interesting. That makes a lot of sense. The way you broke that down is really interesting because I just remember you hear that a lot when you start watching these court cases, and I had a great idea of what they meant, but I didn't understand the part where he just had to say like if he's picking his jury members, like, "Are you sovereign?" No, or like you said, and they say, "No, I'm a United States citizen." Whatever. Next, you know,
Exactly. That's it, because they cannot be a peer, because that's what the word peer means.
that's very
It's been
interesting.
so ingrained in people's minds that peer means equal.
That's right.
It does not mean equal. It means sovereign. Well, technically, it means somebody with a title or entitlement, but in the capacity that it's used when we're talking about the jury, it's a sovereign. You have absolute title to your estate. So that would be the entitlement that's being referred to.
Right.
As
Right.
you hear the word used in peer-reviewed studies, all those people have letters after their names. Those are titles. They have
This
entitlements.
all makes so much sense when you start breaking this down, Ryan. Like it's starting to become, clear, as I say, clear as mud. But I'm getting it. I'm really I'm starting to really grasp a lot of this and how deep it goes and how
It's so
the
deep. It
and the
goes to the
illusion.
spiritual nature of existence.
It
Is
does.
what
This is the root.
this is the beast
This is what
that
we're
we're
up
fighting.
against. Yep. Wow.
Like
Okay, so
everybody
sorry.
on, yeah.
I
Go
don't want to keep cutting you off. I was just like, I want to make sure you don't lose your train of thought with what you're showing us, because I kind of
Oh, I'm
set
not.
you off on a a thing
So
about
if
that question.
here are a couple of rules of thumb, and I have to bring this up because, like you said, seeing a lot of people, your co-hosts spend a lot of money on charlatans, and that is a common thing in this movement intentionally. And a lot of them are actually agents hired to fuck people or screw people over, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
in order to get them to do what your co-host did, said, I looked into it and it didn't get me anywhere, and I wasted money, and now I don't have an interest in it. That's what they want.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of charlatans, and they'll say just enough truth. David Lester Straight, Anna von Reitz, just those two are huge, huge. David Lester Straight gets up there and says, I worked for the CIA. Immediately not going to trust anything you say ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But apparently he still gets a follow. So they give you like some of a decent amount of what they say is what's going on, but then they give you enough truth to lead you in a wrong direction and down at rabbit holes that go nowhere, or spend a bunch of money so they can make a bunch of money on just screwing you over and getting you disinterested in the only thing you should be interested in, right? So with that being said, this subject is, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to actually understand what's going on, right? And you have to be wary of people. If you see somebody, if you're watching a show and they talk about how you want to be the beneficiary, leave immediately. It's dumb. Or they talk about becoming a secured creditor, leave. That's stupid. Because if you accept anything from these people, you are an infant. You don't want to discharge your debt through the Treasury because you're an infant. They're taking care of you. Then they can tell you what to do with the property.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. You know what I
Yeah, that
mean?
makes
Like,
sense. It's a good
just
warning. It's a good warning to people too, because and I know there's a lot of charlatans out there, because I you start hearing stories, and I went and for my co-host, I wouldn't say that he got taken. He learned a lot of really important information. Like I just
did he? So
well,
here's the thing.
I think he did. I mean, he's talking a lot. I don't know if he goes as deep, definitely not as deep as you did, but I learned a lot from listening to him, and he was learning from a few different people. I just don't think he like he didn't go as deep. Like I think
Well,
I don't want to
here's
speak for him, but
let me cut you off for a second and just
okay.
say that is that he can get a lot of good information about their system of law. You can learn about UCC and how it works and all that stuff. You
Right.
can become
Correct.
very adept at it and use it, right?
Yep.
It's pointless because it is a system of legal fraud. That sounds contradictory, but your ignorance is the only thing that keeps it being legal.
I see.
Does that make sense? So you can learn like, oh, I can do this stuff with contract, but the whole system of credit is based upon the unlawful administration and mortgage of you.
Right. Right.
Why do you want to play in their system? We need to break it.
Well, that's what I've always kind of thought too. Right. Like I always thought that too. It's like, even if you have this information and you like, when I think of people, and I was telling you this before we started recording, I've watched a lot of videos of people with the right to travel and driving and all of
Here's
these
the thing.
things, and I'm thinking you're still playing in their system. So I that's what I think. Like I'm like, okay, you understand some things, but you're
Right. So
still
they
playing
go,
along.
I don't have to give you my driver's license. Do you have a
Right.
driver's license? Yes, but I don't have to give it. Well, you just said that you're under contract with the state and you're a usufructuary,
Yeah.
that the state owns your vehicle and gives you permission to operate commercially. And the cop can presume that you're operating in a commercial capacity because you didn't object to it.
Right.
Now, even when you do object to it, it gets even more deep, and the cops don't know this, but the people that are going to make sure it goes through do. If you don't have the MCO, the manufacturer certificate of origin of your vehicle, you don't have the absolute title. That vehicle is automatically the absolute title is given to the state which issued your license immediately.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's what happens. And the manufacturer certificate of origin is the title. You don't get that. You get a certificate of title, which is merely evidence of an ownership interest in something. Other people can have ownership interest in the same thing if you do not have absolute interest in it.
Absolutely.
Which is what the original title does. Now, there is a way around that. You can junk it and get a junk title, and that's an absolute title, right? Even if it's working. It's
right.
But we can get into that at a different time.
Right. Yeah. It's so much. Right. And yeah, but that was like, I love the points that you're making. And that's what I'm saying. Like, it's like there's so much information out there, but my goal is to break free from this system. It's not to, I mean, you got to kind of play along in the rules as you're learning in that. We are part of this world, but I don't want to play in it anymore. I want to break
But
it.
the way that you argue a driver's license thing is they still have to prove you're operating in a commercial capacity. Okay, but none of this even matters if you haven't claimed your estate, and that's the whole thing that these people that are doing. I commend the spirit of what they're doing. They're doing
I do too. Yeah, yeah,
and they're standing up, but they're not doing the work of learning what they're doing first. And I get it; the information's scarce. It is, that's why I'm trying to get. I think I'm heavily shadow banned. I do.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah,
on
this getting out.
Both my platforms, But yeah, just by the mere trick of using different, only residents have to have a license, which is why I brought this up. And I'm going to zoom in for you guys. And they're talking about the members of a state, right?
Okay, perfect.
So let's go ahead and just do Control plus. Okay, so the members of a state. The members of a state are the persons who owe it allegiance and who are entitled to its protection. Right. And now the protection is not giving you welfare and all of that stuff. It's giving you the avenue to assert your rights in court. That's all the protection they give you. And the whole purpose of court is to prove to the world, to the public. Actually, I'm going to do a show called What Happens When the Public Usurps the People, because the public is just an abstract concept that the state is based on. And it's supposed to be the people, but now the public has basically usurp the title of the people and acts as if it is the people. But the public is just supposed to be the witness of what the people are doing. And that's what the court is just to be like, hey, this happened. I attest to it. I swear. And the whole term attest or testify or intestate, which means lack of generative, because it comes back to testicle. And in ancient times, they used to have to hold their testicles when you testified. That's why it's called testified, because guess what? Your testicles were your surety in case you're lying. And if you were lying, they cut your nuts off. Now, how much better would society be if when the lawyer got up to accuse you of some crap, if he had to hold his balls and know that they're going to be chopped off if he's trying to scam you?
That's right. I learned this by listening to one of your shows, and I was like, wow. Like, it's just, yeah. I mean, I'd be telling the truth.
That's what the seal is. The seal is that. So anytime you bring a claim, and this is ancient in pretty much every form of law. Well, there is only one law, but even amongst because remember, everything stems from the common law and your right to contract. That's right. And then you end up in the other laws. But in all of them, you have to put up surety on your word. You have to. You see, what the state does now is they get you to bond your own case. They take power of attorney over you. Okay. And they go to a bonding company and use the power of attorney to get a bond in your name to bond the case.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Like they leave nothing to chance. Like they've got every. Like I just keep thinking.
Yeah, it's the way law works, and they know it, and you do not you personally, but the public, like the people, do not right now because of this warfare, this psychological 5th generational warfare of the schooling system and everything. And so you're an infant, and you are like the people that are listening. If you do not know, you're an infant. Mm-hmm. You are. So when they're administering your estate, they're right in thinking there's nothing you can do about it because you do not know how. I'm trying to remedy that for you. But I cannot do it for you. And that's what I told Rick before the show. Nobody can ever do this for anyone else, because if I do it for you, then you're an infant under me.
So you have to actually open the books and get in there and do it yourself. Like you have to do it yourself. Yeah.
People are going to hate to hear it, right? They are. Oh, I got to work. Yes. Yeah. If you want to save your family and save this last bastion of freedom, because this is, even though it's being unused, but by a few people, this place was founded upon the concept that the people are the sovereign, and it's put down in documentation that we are the power. This is the only place in the world that has that. And the common law system is here. It is the root of what they're doing, and it's going unused by us, the people.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're in the end game with these communists they're trying to put in office, right? It's the end game where they want to eliminate it. They want a civil war, or they want a foreign invasion. They want to destroy the nation and reform it, because they do not want this avenue to ever be here again. That's why they're putting all this digital stuff in place, because with the digital stuff, that's the indenture, that's the administration of your estate by AI. And if they can get that put in you, the indenture put in you via a chip or whatever, you're permanently a slave, controlled by you. There's no way you'll ever get out of it. Because the moment you open a book like this, there's some camera, something they can probably see through your eyes. Who the hell knows what they can do, right?
You're so right. Oh my God.
They're going to come and take you away before you can ever tell anybody about it.
I'm only like, I wish you could see that I got goosebumps, because me and my neighbor were just talking about this about an hour before this interview took place. Like, we were just talking about AI, and we got into digital currency, and then how they're going to, like, I keep telling people, AI is bad news, because they're going to control us even more. And
we'll see like, go ahead.
Just tied into what you just said. Like, I'm just like, wow, like, how do people not see this coming? And then you just broke it down perfect.
They don't see this. This is, the whole system's built on, you're an infant. You don't know how law works, so they get to control your estate. One guy looked up, he went and he did a Freedom of Information Act on his master file, right? He got his master file from the Social Security Administration. Then, and you're labeled as a decedent, which is presumed dead, but unknown if you're dead. It's kind of like an in-between place, because the heir has to be presumed missing. So when you come into court, you're just property of the estate, and they're going to use you as surety and hold you accountable to perform the obligations of the trust that the constructive trust that they've created with the docket number, right? So they're taking a portion of your estate and they're creating a constructive trust for their own purposes. And then that ruling, or whatever the sentence is, right? And think about the words they use. The sentence, they pronounce sentence, right? It's all words. So the sentence that they give you is the indenture that you are liable to meet the performance of the obligations, right? You have to perform the obligations of that indenture, and you're just part of the estate of which the heir, the person who is the heir of the grantor, or is the grantor, is missing and presumed dead. That's how they use the set decay trust. And so the IRS labels you as a decedent. And the IRS is merely an accounting firm for the Federal Reserve, because the Magna Carta says they have to give a full accounting of the property when the heir comes to claim it. And this all goes back to the Magna Carta, even what they're doing. The heir has to give, or the administrator has to give a proper accounting to the heir when he claims the property. So the IRS is merely the accounting service for the Federal Reserve to keep it all nice and tight with the Magna Carta, right? But you're not the heir until you claim it. You're just property of the estate, is what they're going to presume, because you've never said otherwise. So like maybe a servant or an infant child of the estate that's not of age, whatever it is, they're going to tell you what to do with the property, because they control it. And part of that property is your body. It's your car, it's your body, it's everything else. And this is the law of property. This is the law of uses. This is how it works. And it's what they're doing to you. right? And the entire system's based on that. And what they're trying to do, because they know it's a big smoke and mirrors game, is they're trying to make it permanent with AI and digital IDs.
That's right.
So
Yes.
indenture and identity are etymologically rooted in the same place.
God, you're really hitting on. I'm overwhelmed because I as you're teaching this, and I consider you teaching this. I don't know how we get out of this, Ryan. I don't.
I
People
just
are.
told you it's easy.
It's
Actually,
easy, but people are not going to do what you're. They're just. I know
they don't have to. Are you going to?
I'm learning.
That's the whole thing. Like one of the people with the law is the majority in our republic. Our collection of republics, rather, because each state is a republic, is how that works. And then the United States is the union of the republics and is literally a feudal league, or you see what I'm saying, of representatives from, and it's the lowest of the low. But what they've done with the 14th Amendment has contracted you into coming under. So the people created the state as sovereign, vested sovereign, a portion of their sovereign authority, which they also retain simultaneously into the state. Then the states all got together and made the Constitution because the Articles of Confederation wouldn't let them fuck us over. And I'm sorry, I keep saying that word. The longer I'm on, I get passionate about what I'm saying. So
I don't blame you. I get it.
So and then hopefully you can bleep it out or something. And then so this thing is a creation of the creation, is what the United States is. It's twice removed. It's the grandson. But what it's done through contract by offering benefits and then engineering the economic climate to make it so literally millions of people died of starvation through a central bank, which, see, that's another thing that they violated, is that Article 1, Section 10 says no state shall use anything but gold or silver as legal tender in the payment of debts. Well, they're like, well, we're not a state. We're the United States, and we have control over it. So we're going to vest this authority into a third-party private banking system. It's like, well, no. We gave you control of the currency through the Constitution. We vested a portion of our authority into you, but we never vested the authority for you to vest it into somebody else because you're a servant.
That makes sense. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know.
And it all goes back to the law of uses. You're using something of ours that we hold superior title to. You're using our sovereignty that we vested in you as a trustee, as a usufruct. You don't get to vest our authority into anyone else unless we do it or we agree to. This is just how it works. If I let you borrow my car and then you let somebody else borrow my car, you're wrong.
That's right. Well, then how did they even make the Federal Reserve work then? Like this, I don't understand if what you're saying with gold and silver, how did they, like, this is
because
another
the
trick
Federal Reserve. So, and I've seen them in person. There's this place called Dixieland Flea Market by my hometown. And this guy in there was actually selling old Federal Reserve gold and silver certificates. So that's how the banker started in the first place.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, he started using paper certificates of ownership of a portion of gold. And so instead of going and grabbing the gold and giving it to somebody else, they just started trading the paper.
Yeah.
In antiquity, that's how it worked. And they knew that by the time they started the Federal Reserve. So they did the same trick that's been tried and true with every other fiat currency country, which it wasn't fiat when they were gold. So what that meant was when you had a $5 gold or silver certificate, no matter what the market conditions were or how much currency was in circulation, you could go to a Federal Reserve affiliated bank and you could get that amount. Because what people do not realize is dollar is a specific measurement laid out of Spanish silver.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you got $5 or $5 worth in gold of whatever the silver is, right? So, and that's how it worked. And then after they did the Gold Confiscation Act, because by that time, most people had become infants by agreeing to benefits from the federal corporation, right? And so now you're no longer capable of being sovereign. When you come under that, you need the government to protect your rights instead of knowing how to protect your rights. And that's the benefit they offer. That's the simple benefit they offer. So we're going to protect your rights. Well, no, I don't need you. That's why I'm free. If I need somebody to protect me, then I'm not free.
That's right. Yeah. I get it. I get it. Yeah.
So that's
that
how
makes
they
a lot
did
of
it.
sense. That's how they did it.
And then they mortgaged everybody's estate to keep all the 14th Amendment citizens' estates that they had control over. They mortgaged them as collateral for the issuance of Federal Reserve debt notes. And you'll notice on any dollar bill that anybody has in their wallet, if anybody even has them anymore, because everybody, again, that's part of the plan, is the digitizing of currency. So it can just be numbers on a computer screen. Oh, you talk crap about the government, I'm deduct $200.
That's what we were talking about. I was bringing that up with my neighbor. It was like, I said, this is disaster. I said, my shows, I'm in trouble. They're going to go back and listen to my shows and go, oh no. And then
if you think you're in trouble, they're going to kill me.
Exactly. But it's true. Like, and I said, that's what people don't realize is that as soon as it's digital, they've really got us enslaved, because now they can censor our thoughts. It's going to get to the point where it's our thoughts, our emotions. It's all going to be, I have a list of what gets deducted or added to your credit.
But it's all by consent. And what I'm teaching is absolute non-consent. It's not just non-consent, it's lawful non-consent. What it is it's taking, so what I was getting at is one person did the Freedom of Information Act. Then I went on a long rabbit hole about the Social Security Administration or whatever. But anyway, so he did a Freedom of Information Act request on his master file. So that gives him an accounting. But what they do is they encode everything that the account was used for, which it is a constructive trust, and they have the administrative power over it. So I want to make this clear: an administrator is an executor by law. So an executor has absolute power over the trust, but you can only be an executor if the grantor, the creator of the trust, appointed you by will. Okay, so now if there is no will, the state becomes administrator by default, and administrator is the equivalent of executor, but is called administrator because it was not by the will of the person whose property it was. So it's an administrator. Now, that's the key of appointing yourself as an executor on the record after you claim your house, or after you make your seal, claim your house, and declare your state allegiance as one of the people of, I'm in Michigan, so I'm one of the people of Michigan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you expatriate from the corporate feudal United States, and you reclaim your original status as a de jure citizen on the record. And once you do that, right, you then can appoint yourself as executor, and then after that point, anytime you go into a court, or hell, even before you do your paperwork, if you went into a court and they say, state your name for the record, and you say, Your Honor, I come before this court having been found to be living, of age, and capable of managing my affairs, and I am the sole heir and executor of the res defendant estate, is there any objection to what I just said? Because there cannot be an executor and an administrator at the same time. And now you've made that claim, and he has to disprove it.
I get it.
Checkmate.
It's checkmate. You're right. Wow.
Now he's probably going to throw a tantrum.
They always do.
But if you know what you're doing, what can he do? Nothing. And if he continues to proceed, he's actually breaking the law. And they are all liable to suit because since they've become administrators, they're all private for-profit corporations whose purse strings are separate from the state, the actual de jure state. They're working for a municipal corporation. So you have no 11th Amendment immunity from me, buddy, and I'm going to take everything you have. But you have to know due process and all these things, right? But just by starting by being able to say that in the courtroom, that's going to screw up their whole everything that they're trying to do, because the entirety of what they're doing is the administration of your estate. They control the estate. It is sheeted to them because they presume the heir to be dead, right? And the estate is intestate. Nobody expressed a will. And so naturally it falls under the doctrine of escheat, and the state takes control of it. And now they make rules on how to deal. That's why they call them rules. That's administrative. And they make rules on how to deal with the property and how the property should be taken care of. And the property includes your body, your children, your wife, your car, your house, everything that you own. And they're going to tell you, and that's what code is. Code is just a bunch of rules of how to deal with the property that they're administering. And you can end all of that just by claiming it properly with your seal.
That's it boils back to what we were first talking about at the beginning.
And then now I know what you're doing. You go in the courtroom with this black robe priest and you tell him, I know what you're doing. I mean, you don't actually say this, but this is what you're thinking, because you don't want to make claims, right? And if you do make a claim, you want to end it with a question, like, is there any objection to what I just said? Now you're placing, can you disprove what I said? But if you just make a claim, they're going to stay silent. It's up to you to prove it. But if you ask a question, they have to answer. And that's the whole thing. It's what's called in common law, right? You make a declaration or a writ or whatever, and that's what they do. They come back and they say yeah, nay, or they don't say anything, and then they're agreeing by not saying anything. So you say that, and he says, is there any objection, right? I come before this court having been found to be living, of age, and fully capable of managing my affairs, and I am the sole heir and executor of the res defendant estate. Now, res, all this is happening in rem. They're not actually dealing with you. They're dealing with the estate, and res means the thing. The thing is the defendant, not you. You are just standing as a representative and surety for it if you're not in your full capacity. Otherwise, you're just trying to be honorable and settle what you hope was a mistake, that maybe you didn't realize this, right? And that's being honorable by presuming that they made a mistake instead of just outright saying you're trying to pirate me, trying to pillage me.
Yeah, it's like, I understand. You know what they're doing, but it's like, I understand it was a mistake.
Right. And that's called honor. The
Yeah.
whole thing's based around the whole of law and court, and everything is based around civility and honor. You have to be honorable at all times. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So if you go in there saying a bunch of nasty stuff, like I see these auditors saying a bunch of nasty stuff to the cops, and say, well, first of all, the cop definitely, that's why he's a cop. He's not smart enough to do anything else with his life, right? It's a guaranteed paycheck. Now, don't get me wrong. I got some buddies that are cops, and they're smart and stuff, but you know, they don't know. They're order followers. They have a sense of duty. Right. They have a sense of duty, right? And they believe that their duty is just to do whatever whoever's above them tells them to do. And they don't actually know the law. When in reality, the only law enforcement we should have are sheriffs and sheriff's deputies, and every single one of them should know the law.
I would hope so, yeah.
No, that's how it's supposed to be.
That's supposed to be, right?
Right. So let me get to this real quick. So it says the member of a state. Let's see if I can highlight this real quick. A member of a state may be either a citizen occupying the status entitled citizenship, or he may be a resident alien. Okay. Now remember, this is elementary law, which means basic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, or a resident alien occupying the status designated by the title residence. Okay. So, a citizen is a permanent member of the state, owes it allegiance at all times, and is entitled to its permanent protection, whether he is at home or abroad. The status of citizenship, is distinguished by its permanent, impersonal nature, and may be determined by the place of his birth, which is jus soli, right, which means the law of the soil in Latin, or by the nationality of his parents, which is jus sanguinis, which means the law of the blood. And then you get allodial, which is the law of the blood and the soil. This is where this all goes back to, right? So basically what this is saying is that if you were born, or if your parents were born and may be abroad when you're born, but they still are citizens of that state, then you, by virtue of jus sanguinis, or the law of the blood, are a citizen of that state, even if you were born abroad, right? So,
Okay. Yeah.
and then it says by his election or by some form of naturalization, which is when foreigners come in. The case I was telling you guys, McDonald v. State, and the guy came from Germany, naturalized in Indiana, and became an Indiana state citizen, though he was not a citizen of the United States, because the United States does not designate the several republics unless it specifically says the United States of America or the continental United States. A resident alien, on the other hand, is a person residing within a state other than the state of which he is a citizen, which is what the 14th Amendment citizen. That's why you will never hear a governor say Michigan citizens.
Okay. That's very interesting.
They always say resident.
Resident. Yep.
Because they're administering foreign infants. Because the United States is and always has been, from the creation of this country, foreign to the several states. There's court cases all the way back in the 1700s between states and the United States.
So individual states have way more
Power.
Power than the United States.
Until they committed treason, yes. Because the states only have power because the people in them have vested some of their power to this organization to do work on their behalf that they do not have time or feel like doing.
Okay, that make that and the reason I brought that up, Ryan, is because I learned that it came clear to me during COVID when I saw each individual state doing their own thing, and then
they had to. The governors all committed treason, yeah.
Exactly. And then I realized that the president, he didn't have any real power. That's when I realized it. I was like, wow, like this, the individual states have they have a lot of power.
States have no power, though. That's other than what we give to them by our consent.
You're correct. Yes.
And that's what common law can do. You can so another beautiful thing about common law is, say, like it's a creditor corporation comes after you, right? Over like say you got a loan, and when in reality all they're doing is being a middleman for your own credit and your own money, and they actually make money off of it. So they're not actually giving you anything. And also the contract is void ab initio, which means from the beginning, because there is no lawful consideration, which is part of the law of contracts. Nobody's using money. Supreme Court's upheld multiple times a promise to pay does not constitute payment. It's in the Federal Reserve, their code books. It's in the IRS. Like a Federal Reserve note is not money. It's not. It's a debt security, which is why the Securities and Exchange Commission is one of the most powerful organizations on the planet, because they became the global reserve currency for every other currency. It's all tied to the dollar, so it all comes back through Securities and Exchange. At least I'm pretty sure it does. But the thing is not money. That's what we have to focus on. And therefore the contract is void ab initio. Now, when you claim your estate and you give others the opportunity to assert a superior claim, which they cannot, so it's just more of a formality. And then you put out the contract saying, hey, if you continue to administer my estate, and then you're going to be a trustee and you're liable if you maladministrate it. So once you do that, when you take that person to tort, you're not taking the corporation, which is their protection, because you cannot do that in common law. You cannot take the corporation to suit.
Okay.
It's not a common law thing. You have to take it to equity, right? You're taking the person and their personal property to court. So you are spanking that person's ass. Literally.
Yeah.
The whole idea of corporations is a layer of protection for these people to do things they know are wrong, but then the corporation takes the fall. Take Pfizer, for example. Now, what if you brought to common law suit the executive officers of Pfizer? They don't have the protection of Pfizer anymore. They are personally liable for their actions that have harmed you. That's what common law is. That's why they want it gone.
That's a lot of power.
It's the utmost.
No wonder they fear it.
Of course, they have no choice.
Yeah, it's like the equalizer. I'm just thinking, like, it's like,
That's why Mojo, as soon as he filed that, they thought he was a joke when he went to his arraignment. When they decided to proceed against his will to trial and he brought that counterclaim, the DA's calling him in the office. First said, hey, we'll make it a $25 parking ticket. And he said, for what? I didn't do, why would I negotiate with you? There's no crime. And you're not going to administer my estate. And then they came back the day of the trial and they said, how about we just give you a driving class and then the court will dismiss the charges. It's literally what they offered him. Sweet deal, right?
Yeah,
well, I love Mojo for this. He said, no, because you would still be administering my estate, and there's no reason for me to enter into any agreement with you because I did nothing and I'm not under you, essentially is what he said.
Right.
And then you know what they did? Exactly what I told you. The judge literally asked for permission to have time to look at what he said because he's now the sovereign and that's his court, and then caught himself and said, well, wait, no, I'm not going to ask for anything, right? And Mojo could have literally just said, listen, if you guys are still trying to even discern whether or not you have jurisdiction, I motion to dismiss this case. I move to dismiss this. And he could have done that. That's why at the end of the video, the judge goes, no more motions, no more motions. Mojo did not know that. I told him that after. I said, that's why he said that, because you could have just dismissed the case. It's your court. And the judge,
I see. Okay. Wow.
And the judge admitted it's your court by asking you anything, asking for permission to do anything, rather. He knows. The judge knows.
And that's why no more motions, no more motions. Like, let's go. Like, yeah.
Right. But even saying that, he doesn't have the authority. Mojo still could have said it.
You guys said we got to just dismiss this.
Yeah. I moved to dismiss this because it's called Viva Voce. Or Vosa, I forget how it's pronounced, but it means of the voice, basically, or the living voice. And the living voice is the most powerful law. You can undo all the law that you write and submit just by speaking in court.
This is fascinating, Ryan. It really is.
It's the most powerful law. So the written law is considered dead law. Living law always supersedes dead law. So if you go into the court and you say something, it can either undo or reinforce what you submitted. And that's the whole thing.
Right. That makes a lot of sense, actually, when you say it that way. Like the written law is one thing, but the spoken is most powerful.
But right here, so you see that residence, it says he owes... It says he's residing within a state other than the state of which he's a citizen. And if the viewers want to know, it's called being domiciled, is when you're actually a citizen. It's your domicile, or you are domiciled within a state, right? That's what you say when you're a citizen. You can only ever have one domicile. You can have a bunch of residences in a bunch of different states, but then it's under this definition. You're a foreigner. You don't have the full authority and protection of a state citizen in that state, but you owe it, it's your allegiance, and it owes you a certain amount of protection, as this goes on to say. Like it says he owes the state of his sojourn, which means travel, essentially, allegiance, and is entitled to its protection during his stay. The status of his membership, which it says right here, residence, is distinguished by its temporary and local nature. Citizenship usually includes privileges and powers such as the right to vote or hold governmental office, and special duties such as required military service, which are not included in mere residence. It's a lower status.
I gotta get this book.
Well, this is just one of many great books.
I can imagine. Yeah, I gotta find some books and start really diving into this, because this is really the key that we're seeking. I would think. What do you mean? Well, I just think that this knowledge is the key. Like, we keep trying to, like, I talk to so many people and we're always talking about how do we attain this freedom? How do we get the things that we say we want? And it's kind of like you kind of, at least I find you kind of start running in circles in a way, where you just kind of chasing your tail, trying to figure out how do we get out of this? How do we get out of this? Like, people probably even listening are saying, okay, I get it. Like, a lot of people agree that we're basically under slavery. And then but then most people will say, well, and a lot of people don't even address this as the solutions. Like, how do we get out of this? Like, it's such a hydra, and they've covered, like I said, they leave nothing to chance. Like, people just wonder, how do you, and I wonder that too, like, how do we get out of this? And then from what you're breaking down, this is how we get out of it, like
So
this knowledge.
this particular book by itself is a great book for reference. Again, written by a lawyer, so you have to take everything with a grain of salt, because again, he's going to, when he talks about sovereignty, he doesn't explain to you what I just explained to you about.
He glosses over it, right?
He'll gloss over it and try to mislead, and that's what they always do. The key to it is the understanding of the illusion of authority, okay, which all law is based upon and has been. Even in ancient Rome, when they started holding court, it wasn't called a judge, it was called a praetor. And when people had a disagreement, one person would basically summon or call another person to court, and his attendance to that proceeding was entirely voluntary. Also, his acquiescence to the judgment. If he had superior power and authority to basically fight off the plaintiff, then he was innocent. That's the whole thing. And what happened was, as people started coming and submitting to this court system to have this done this way, these disagreements solved this way, which is civilized and is good if everybody knows what they're doing. The state started taking upon more and more authority to force the defendant to come to court and all this. And the more power we gave it, the more it took. And so the whole thing is, though, it all requires consent. So there would be no disagreement between two people in the first place unless you enter a contract, and that person can prove that you're liable for non-performance of some sort of obligation. And that's the only way you end up in a court, or if you harm them, right? So that's the one underlying thing, is it's always been wrong to harm. And that's always been what law has been revolves around. But outside of, if you're not harming anybody, the only way you can come under other men is by contract. And that's the easiest way to sum up the jurisdictions. You have common law, which is the law of harm. Did the other person actually harm you? Not just physically, but financially or in any other kind of way that you can prove, and that there's a proven cause of action for, that's been laid down by. That's why we have all this. You can go from the Magna Carta to the founding constitutions of the states, and that body of law laid down in the Magna Carta is unchanged. The reason being is because it's not up to man's interpretation. This is what it is. This is what it always has been. And you don't get to extend it or to diminish it in any way. And that's why they wanted, I can show you a common law book, maybe if we do another show.
Absolutely, we will. If you want, I would love to.
Where the lawyer is literally writing this book trying to make an argument. It's a common law book, a book on common law. And he's trying to make the argument right in the opening pages of why equity is better. And equity is better because it allows for more judicial discretion. It allows for interpretation. Basically, common law is rigid and inflexible. But we can account for the subtle nuances of human interactions, or we can force somebody to do something or not to do something before they do it. That's equity. He literally says that. You can preemptively force somebody not to do it before they do it. That's why he likes equity. And what that means to me, somebody who knows law, is you like equity better than common law because you want to be God.
That's what I took when you said that. I was like, I know exactly what's in his mind.
And that's exactly what's in all these filthy lawyers' mind. Well, they're not a lawyer because I'm a lawyer. Anybody who studies the law is a lawyer. They're attorneys. They're filthy scumbag attorneys. And the attorney's only job is to take property from one person and give it to another, by definition. That's what attorney is.
It's just so corrupt.
Well, the people are so ignorant. They're not even people. They're infants. They're humans. They're persons.
So it kind of and I've heard you, it kind of is interesting the way you say that too, because I've even said, when I said Ryan back, I said, when my parents signed my birth certificate and that, I said, they should have known. And you're like, well, should have they? And that what's kind of interesting is the way that you're saying that, it's God, how do I word it? I can't word it the way I mean what I'm feeling. Like I get what you're saying. Like this, let me put it this way: the system is working perfectly, the way they designed it. The problem is that we don't understand the system. Is that right? Like
That's exactly right. The system works lawfully and according to what society needs, minus communism and minus uniform commercial law, in
right,
my
right.
opinion, which is basically international law merchant. But it's working according to the needs of society. Like I told you have common law if you're not under any that's the default, right? And then that's where all the contracts are created. And then depending on what type of contract it is, if it's just a normal contract to paint my house, it goes to equity if there's a problem with it, right? If it's a contract with the government to go fight, it's the military, right?
Yep.
So, and then if I don't leave a will, my estate's going to end up in probate, which is necessary. We have to know how to deal with this property that belonged to somebody else so that it can continue to be in use. Like if somebody dies intestate and we recognize that the common law of property and we just nobody lives there anymore, then what happens if that happens too much? We're just going to have large swaths of land unused.
That's correct. Yep.
Right. Okay. So you got the equity, the military, and the maritime is the one I'm leaving out. Is the maritime is necessary because the law of the international law of merchants essentially is what that winds up being, is necessary for different nations who have different laws and societies to come under one common way of doing business regarding ships, vessel,
right.
the vessels, the piracy, the various incidences, if a ship hits rocks and we need insurance now, that's where insurance started. That's a maritime admiralty thing to make sure that all the goods on the ship are insured so that if something happens on the voyage, it's, the people who had product on the ship or were expecting the product from the ship are covered. And so that's where insurance. So all these things meet the necessities, the needs of civilized society.
That's right.
The main glaring problem and the reason they've been able to twist all this stuff and use it against us is because we stopped learning the law.
That's a great way to boil it down. It's the truth. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Everybody knows of the quote where James Madison was asked, what type of government is it that we've been given? And he says, a republic, if you can keep it. But there's one version of that I believe is true, even though it's impossible to find. It says that George Washington was standing nearby, overhearing the conversation, and he said, to keep it, every man must learn the law. That's a fact.
That's right. It's so true.
Every man must learn the law. So, at the end of the day, that's why if you want to be truly civilized and understand the law, because we all have to stand under it, right? And you want to comprehend why and how they're doing what they're doing and maintain honor, even though you want to hang them like I do. I want to hang them, but I have to be civil and I have to understand that, okay, this all only happened because of my ignorance. But now I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to inform you of exactly what our relationship is. And if you violate that, now you can be hung.
That's right. Yeah. No,
but if you don't do that,
yeah. That just makes a lot of sense because, and people have a hard time with that too, is because it just, like you were saying, this takes a lot of time and work to learn all of this and to understand it. It's one thing to read these books now, but then you have to understand it. Like this is what we talked about today is just, my brain is just like overloaded. It really is.
It's just a whole different way of looking at the world.
Oh yeah. My brain's just going, okay, enough. Like, okay, I'm full. It's just so much. And I know what you're thinking. We haven't even scratched the surface of all of it. And I'm just, so there's so much. And I just know people are lazy on the most part when it comes to learning this kind of stuff. I can't get people to watch a 1-hour video about freedom or natural law or anything. Never mind what you've put in and other people have put into learning what you just spoke about. Like and that's the problem, I think.
Well, here's the thing. You can do nothing but but do what you're supposed to do as a man and protect yourself and secure your house and your family. And if you want to do that, and remember, in a constitutional republic, as long as it stands, one man in the law is a majority. That's the difference between a democracy where the majority enslaves the minority, right? So with that being said, I will kind of wrap it up with this one thing, because we can definitely do a part 2 for sure.
Absolutely.
But I don't viewers on the first one. So
absolutely, I will do a part 2 with you. I'd love that.
That would be awesome. I would love that as well. And I appreciate you. And you're very good at doing this interview. Like, it's impressive. It's one of the best ones I've been on. So the Mark Passio, I was also impressed that you had him on. Am I mistaken? You had him on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. He's an amazing person.
I like him. I don't agree with everything he says, but I really, really align with his insights on spirituality and occultism and understanding, and very impressed that he was able to get away from what he was in.
I'm the same way. I respect him. And his work speaks for itself. Doesn't mean I agree with everything, but I mean, what can I say?
But that's the beauty of it, right?
That's
We're not supposed to. He's not going to agree with everything I say. You're not going to. And that's the beauty, but we can find our commonality. And I agree with most everything he says. And one thing he says that's really profound, it was a huge profundity to me. There's a difference between ignorance and nescience. Okay, so when we go back to your parents and signing your birth certificate, okay, they were nescient. Okay, we didn't have the internet and all this stuff like we have now, right? We didn't have the availability of information, and not to mention there's an active, concerted, and very powerful effort to keep this information hidden, which was much easier before the internet. So they were nescient. Nescient is not ignorant. It differs in ignorance in this respect. Nescient is not even knowing that you should be looking into this knowledge, not having access to it. You just don't even have access. You don't even have access to the knowledge that you need access to the knowledge. Right? So you're just completely unaware that this is even a thing. So you're not being ignorant. The key word of ignorant is to ignore.
Ignorance.
Now you become ignorant when you're made aware of something. And you can see it, know it to be true, and you ignore it. Or even if you believe it's not true, in order for you to say that it's not true lawfully, you have to look into it and disprove it, because that's how claims work.
That's right.
That's why in court you never make a claim. You ask questions.
That's a really good reminder, Ryan. Like I'm thinking about, because what I said about, like, why do parents sign over? Like, why do parents even do this to their children? And I'm thank you for bringing that up and reminding me about nescience, because that's very important. But the difference between nescience and ignorance, like you're breaking down, my parents didn't know. They thought they were doing what they were supposed to do.
Exactly. They were trying to be law-abiding good people.
Exactly.
And even though technically what they were doing was treason, the most important thing about law is the spirit and intention by which somebody does something.
That's right. Yes.
That changes murder to manslaughter. Right? It changes a life sentence to a 4-year sentence. Did you mean to run that person over, or was it genuinely an accident? It's your intention. It's the spirit of your intention. And so they were nescient, right? And they had no idea. They intentionally worked very, very, very hard to create this comfortable artificial womb of industrialized middle-class society where they could maintain these middle-class people under an indenture, but keep them comfortable enough to where they have enough that they'll never ask questions.
You're so for that describes what's going on.
Not now. Now they're trying to take it.
Yeah, now they're taking everything that they. Yeah. But
now
back, back when I was growing up, that was kind of like you described it perfectly. It was this little bubble. Perfect.
They intentionally created an artificial womb of government as daddy parent who took relatively good care of its children.
Not now.
So there was no reason to even, you know what I mean? And they slowly tiptoed these encroachments, right? They basically a one act here, vehicle theft prevention program there. Why don't you register your vehicle so that if it gets stolen, we could find it? That's where registration came from.
And that's how they sold it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But what you did not know, and they didn't teach you in school, damn sure didn't teach you in the Rockefeller education indoctrination camp, was that when you register something, you're giving it away. You're giving absolute ownership of it away to the state. And now you only get the right of use, which is usufruct. And now the government gets to tell you how to use it. And that created the motor vehicle code.
I mean, and you know what's this is just kind of a thought that I had while you said that, because it's relevant, just because we're talking about registration, and now, you know, a lot of people for pets, they have to register them. And I don't know,
Absolutely. You have to
and I'm just
register.
like, you're giving your ownership of your pet over to the government.
Yeah, so they can tell you to spay, neuter it, to vaccinate it, to do all sorts of messed up
Jesus,
stuff to
it's
it.
so nefarious, dude. Like,
I know.
I'm just, it's just the more we talk, it's just like, oh my God, like they're even got their hands in that. And that's why I thought about the pets. I'm like, and it's true. Like now they're really, it's crazy what they're doing with pets. And then I know farmers that, you know, would sell eggs and stuff like that, homesteaders, and now they're coming after them. Like it's never ending, this relentless taking.
They'll try to tell you, and you can even go back significantly in law books, because the concept of registry is the Roman law civil filth that entered England in 1066. Registry will try to come up with some pretty like glossed over definition for what it is, but the very etymology of the word is regus, which is crown, king, sovereign.
Okay.
Ter, which is essentially, to break it down, to allow the use of, or to have the ability of use. So register, you're giving, not use is not the right, it's basically the right of direction. I don't know how to explain it properly, because now you're getting really back into the foundations of English, and I can't really go too much into that, but
okay.
Regus is crown, and to register is basically to give the crown authority over the property. That's the simplest way to put it.
Yeah,
and that is what it is. That's what they do in the registry. So like I said earlier in the interview, we didn't have a registry system, or maybe it was before we even got on air. I don't remember, but we didn't even have a registry system. We have a record system. We record our deeds. A deed is an action. It's just any action. Most people think that deed is involves like land and stuff. But yes, that is a deed. That's if you're selling or buying, conveying land, right? That is a deed, because it's an action, and you record the action. The other person acknowledges the action, and then it stands as a fact at law. But all a deed is an action. That's it. And we record it. We never register it. We are the sovereignty. Who are we going to register it to? Well, once you got the filthy bar association over here, well, we register it to them. That's why there's always an attorney at the sale of a house. He acts as the third party representative, the representative of the party that actually owns it. But I have a cheat code for that one too. Well, it's not a cheat code, actually. It's a righteous code. We should call it that, because what they did was actually a cheat code by even introducing it and convincing people to do it, because it's not supposed to be here. Like I think it's either Illinois or Indiana, their first constitution, and forgive me for not having it, but it is there, and I'll show it on my show. Actually, I did show it on my show, one of my last shows. Cool. And it says that all the people have absolute right and claim to the land and property of the state. And another constitution says that all lands are allodial, which is blood and soil, which is actually goes back to when the Vikings entered England and conquered them and actually taught them that sovereignty comes from the people, not from the king. That's actually what happened. I think it was the 900s. Yeah, it was like 9 something to 1055. The Vikings were there, and that's where the English learned that all authority comes from the people, not from the bastard sitting on the throne. And so allodial is what they would do to claim the land. They'd literally mix their blood with the soil and make an oath before the creator, before divinity, that they're going to be a good steward, take care of it, and improve it. And even though in law they call it devolving, because we can't improve on what God did. So in law they actually call property devolving when it goes from one hand to another from its original state, which is accurate. It is devolving because we can't make God's creation better. And that's how this all goes back to the understanding of a creator. That's the whole point.
That's right. That's right. And that I didn't know that about the Vikings. Like that's really interesting. And what's kind of interesting too is that when people, the way they would sell Vikings, at least when I was younger, is that they were savages and
they're
all
brilliant.
of this. And I know, and it's like once again they invert the truth.
They were brilliant, but they were uncontrollable. Interesting fact about London.
So interesting. Wow.
Actually, the Celts or Celts, however you say that, it just feels wrong to say Celts, but it probably
Celts,
is.
Yeah,
right.
The Celts.
So they were so savage that the city of London was established in 45 AD. But the advancement of the Roman horde only got that far because the Druids came down and whooped their asses. And they would fight naked, which really unsettled the Romans. They were like, what is this that is happening here? These dudes are coming with the junk out and they're
butt ball naked.
Yeah. So they built the Hadrian Wall. They built the Hadrian Wall to keep out the Celts. You know what I mean? Because they couldn't conquer them. And then, so since then, London has existed as a appendix of Rome ever since 45 AD. And that's why the Magna Carta gives it due respect and says that, okay, so what we're saying, the city of London, which is just a small portion of it, what they call London, is sovereign and can maintain its ancient customs and uses, and we're not going to mess with it because they still had to be civil and give Rome respect. Because you got to understand the whole history of our systems of law. What we're living in right now has been a war between, let's say, the Viking common law and Roman civil law. It has been. The Magna Carta was created because this republic was created as a result of that war. That's why we have the freedom of religion. The freedom of religion does not mean that you're free to not believe in God at all. In fact, you can hold office or testify if you're an atheist. You're considered like an infant or a madman. You're in the same category. What it meant is that no person will, or no state will, give their allegiance to a religious body, because Rome, or the Church of Rome, the Vatican, what is now called the Vatican, it was not then, the papacy, is both political and religious figure. It's both a political and religious figure. He's not only the head of the Catholic Church, which I respect the Catholic Church, actually. I've come to understand things about, there was only one Christianity, but the institution is subject to corruption like any other institution, and it has suffered corruption and is right now suffering corruption, right? But this entire thing is a war between those two systems of law. And basically one system of law says people can govern themselves under God in the proper way, and the other system says that people are incapable of governing themselves. In the very first trust, when we're talking about usufruct and this concept of splitting a title and allowing others the right of use under your discretion, which is just a way of controlling people's will, was created by the church. And I think right after the Magna Carta, and probably in response to, I think it was like 1306 or 1308, is Unum Sanctum, which is where the Pope declared the entire world and everything in it to be under him, that he's holding in trust as an executor, right? Well, executor is barbarous to Roman civil law, so I guess administrator. And then he appointed the Venetian black nobility to be the trustees, and then they are the ones who have controlled the world ever since.
Wow, this is fascinating. This is definitely, we got to do a part 2. because we're getting even deeper into this, and this is really like interesting and so important that people hear this, Ryan. And I've always said that Rome, like you always hear that Rome fell, and I'm like, Rome didn't fall; it just changed its face. Is all
Well,
it
it's
did.
interesting because Rome fell. So, like when William the Conqueror came over and conquered England and introduced this whole usufructuary system into their system of common law, and where you get the idea of estates and infants and wards and all this stuff, right? Well, he was considered a barbarian because he was a Norman. And what happened was Rome had become so weak that they allowed barbarians into, because the Romans, honestly, in my opinion, they stole everything they ever had. They never had an original idea, and they weren't very much good at anything other than being thugs and taking slaves. So there's two things the Romans were ever good at. Okay, or three things: copying other people, which is where they got everything they ever have, right, or had. Secondly, keeping slaves. Very good at slavery. Excellent. Still to this day, fantastic at slavery. They're the best that ever did it, right? And then thirdly is keeping records of the slaves and the things they steal. Immaculate record keeping system, which is what we get now in our law. That's the Roman influence. Is nothing in law is from Rome except for the detailed record keeping and the power of it, which is probably actually the most important. So I'll give them that credit.
Gotta give us some, yeah, a little bit.
Right. That is the most important part because that's how we do everything. We have to correct the record, but they had nothing of their own, so they were weak at this point because they extended themselves too much, right, through their conquests, and they just basically they reached too far. They were Icarus, right?
That's right.
Flew too close to the sun.
Yep.
Right. And then the barbarian hordes, such as the Normans, that they became so weak that they had to add these people into their government, even though they weren't Roman by nature, right? And what ended up happening was those barbarian hordes seized upon the weakness, and that's how Rome fell. But the barbarian hordes continued to perpetuate the law that they had been able to use to acquire so much property.
That's right. That's what I mean when I say it fell, but it didn't fall. It changed its face. That's kind of like what I mean. Like,
I wasn't saying you were wrong. I was just giving you the detailed explanation of the
right.
law.
No, I get that. Yeah, but some people might be like, "Oh, what do you mean?" But I just said it. It didn't fall. It changed its face, and you broke it down perfectly. It's just interesting how they invert everything. Like once again, you have the way they talked about Vikings and the barbarians and all of this and then you realize the truth is that they brought something so valuable to the table, like, and then it's just frustrating.
Well,
They invert everything good. That's one of one of the big talks I was having with my neighbor. We were kind of talking about a lot of these things, and I said everything is just they invert everything. They don't, and you've made a good point, Ryan. They don't create anything. Nothing is ever created. They just take stuff, invert it, twist it, and that's what we get.
Well, the Romans, they just write stuff down and say this is so, and they lie about its authenticity.
It's craziness.
And they, like when Constantine supposedly gave Rome over to the church, right? That turned out to be like mostly a forgery, and they had to admit it. And they just wrote it down, and they said, "Yeah, he did this, and this is what it is, and we're going to act like it's heaven." Or just let's take the unum sanctum for existence. Like the dude literally just wrote down, "I control the world, and everything is under me, and God says so, and now that's what it is." And then just wrote it on a piece of, well, what I think is human skin, but I haven't been able to find any validation of that. It would make sense though. And then says, yeah, this is what it is now. Right. So
yeah. And we get that.
That's all they do. That's what the Congress does right now, but they do it. They've actually created this complex system of legality that actually makes it consensual in a way through your ignorance. Right. So it's how they, and again, go back to the predictive programming and all that stuff. That's why they have to tell you what they're doing, because they always need your consent, and that's what it boils down to. That's
right. That's key, is our consent, and it's true. It's craziness when you really think about it. Like they just write shit down on paper, and it's a law, and that frustrates me too, especially with like legalizing weed, which, hey, I love weed, but I'm telling you, there's a lot of people that their lives were destroyed for what now is pretty much legal everywhere, and it's just because they just wrote it down, and all of a
Well,
sudden now
see,
some, you know.
now I want you get you to I want you to understand, and perhaps what I'm talking about on some spiritual sense that I do not know of. Maybe they were given this by a higher dimensional entity to be able to write these things. But when they write that stuff about weed, they're able to do that because you have given over control of your estate to them, and now they can tell you how to use it, and your body is part of that estate. So they're like, hey, no, little infant, you're an infant, remember Title 1
That's
Section
right.
8.
It keeps going down to that. You're right.
No, little infant, you need to take care of that property because the heir might come forth and claim it, and it's our responsibility to make sure that property is well maintained, because that's what we get paid for as administrators, because they get to take like 33, no, it is 33% of everything they do as administrators. That's a friend of the court loves it. That's what they're just administering an estate. That's it. That's all they're doing. And the child is an entitlement. It's literally, I have paperwork where it's listed as an entitlement.
And that's how they get away with all the things. That's how they get away with writing these laws. And
yeah, because they have complete discretion when you're an infant. Now, when you put it on the county record that you're not, and you actually know how to stand on it, which is why nobody else can do it for you, there is nothing they can do, because that's where they get all their money. Which, to bring it full circle, and I'll make it the last thing I bring up because I know we're getting
perfect. Yeah, let's land this plane.
Let's land it. So the guy who FOIA'd the Social Security Administration, they wrote everything in code of where the money was, or the securities were transferred, and how the, let's just call it productive value, because there's no money involved here, but the productive value of the estate was used. And it was all, so you had to do more FOIA requests on the coding that they were using in the master file to find out exactly what they were. And they were freaking Abrams tanks and rockets and rifles and all.
Oh,
so everything they're doing, killing other people overseas, is because they have nothing themselves. They're buying all this stuff to kill people from you, and you're complicit. That's what Edward Mandell House said.
That's correct.
He said they'll be complicit in our scheme. Essentially, it's not verbatim, but just read the quote. It's readily available. You can go find it. And they're using our trusts, or not our trust. They're creating trusts from our estate, and then using the productive value of those trusts to purchase tanks and bombs and planes, everything they buy. That's how they're doing it. It's all through the Social Security trust, because the Social Security is a constructive trust that they created out of our estate. And it's the primary one that binds us, aside from the pledge of the birth certificate.
The Social Security, I figured that. Yeah. So the birth certificate and the Social Security is the big.
But he actually found out they were Abrams tanks and everything.
That is so wild.
Right.
But why doesn't it surprise me? Like, it doesn't surprise me, right? Like, when you start, I can imagine
what they're using the money for.
Yeah. I can't even imagine. Like, I can't. I mean, I guess the sky's the limit at this point.
Let's not get into Epstein and all that stuff and where all the dark money goes, right?
Exactly. Oh, for sure. That's what I mean. Like, let's do that in part 2. I mean, if you're willing to come back, I would love to have you back. I know, like I said, I know you're busy, so we can schedule it.
We just have to schedule it, like I said, for either a Friday or Saturday night.
That's perfect. I would love to have you back, Ryan. And thank you so much. It was only supposed to be 2 hours, but I'm so happy that we were able to make it longer. I mean, this is amazing. And it's a lot. This is a lot. And it's going to take me a couple listens to go back. And I just recommend everybody, please go check out Ryan on YouTube. He's got a show there where he breaks all of this stuff down, and he's been doing it for a while. And this is where you got to start. And so just check out I'll put a link in the description, as I promised, BurnTheCorporateFiction. It's on YouTube. You can find Ryan there and start learning this. This is important, probably most important. So thank you, Ryan, so much for being here. I really did appreciate this so much. And I'm looking forward to having you back.
I appreciate you having me on. I'm glad I was able to disseminate this information, and that's the point of why I do what I do. So, and I thank you for bringing me onto another platform, the radio show, and reaching more people. And if you ever have any questions personally about this information and you want to, because like I said, you're not going to be able to get everybody to do this. We just need enough. And if you know, if you want to learn more and you need personal correspondence, honest, just ask me or just reach out. Yeah. So
awesome. That's so cool. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. This was a long one, but it is definitely so important and such great information here. This is what we need to talk about more. So I want to thank everybody who hung in and is listening. And I'm going to get Ryan back for a part 2, I promise. And we'll continue where we picked up, where we left off basically this evening, because it was a long one, but this was so worth it. So thank you, guys. And I'm going to wrap the show up here. Ryan, just stick there for 1 second. And let me just kind of bring in the ending here, and then I can hit you on the way out here.
all right.